A letter arrives, taunting Hercule Poirot. Look out for Andover. A body falls, an A.B.C. railway guide beside it. Then another Bexhill, Churston, Doncaster each. Death, a chilling step in an alphabetical dance of murder. Who is A.B.C.? A madman, a genius, or something far more sinister, hiding behind a mask of chaos. As Poirot's little grey cells race against time, one question burns: will he unravel the killer's game before the alphabet runs out? Pause, a sharp violin, sting, listen, and discover the truth. Chapter 10. The Alphabetical Reckoning. The fire in Hercule Poirot's London flat crackled with a rhythm that seemed to pulse in time with the tension filling the room. Shadows danced across the walls, cast by the flickering flames and the soft glow of a single chandelier, its crystals catching the light like tiny prisms. The air was thick with anticipation, heavy with the weight of secrets about to be unveiled. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, immaculate figure commanding the space as if he were a conductor before an orchestra. His eyes, sharp and glittering like polished emeralds, scanned the gathered faces. Captain Arthur Hastings, loyal but perpetually bewildered. Megan Barnard, her fiery spirit tempered by grief. Alexander Bonaparte cussed, a trembling shadow of a man, his hands fidgeting with a frayed handkerchief. Franklin Clark, suave and composed, though a faint sheen of sweat betrayed his calm. And Inspector Crome, his stern features set in a mask of professional skepticism. Chief Inspector Japp, leaning against the mantel, chewed thoughtfully on an unlit pipe, his gruff presence a grounding force amidst the charged atmosphere. The room was a study in contrasts. The plush velvet of the armchairs clashed with the stark purpose of the gathering, and the delicate clink of teacups on saucers seemed absurdly out of place against the gravity of the moment. Outside, the London night pressed against the windows, a faint fog curling through the streets like a conspirator in the drama unfolding within. Poirot's voice, when he spoke, was a velvet blade, smooth, precise, and cutting. Mise à mise, he began, his Belgian accent lending a musical cadence to the words. We are gathered here tonight to bring an end to a most diabolical game. The A.B.C. murders, as they have been called, are no mere spree of madness. Nan, they are a tapestry woven with cunning, each thread chosen to deceive, to distract, to destroy. Hastings shifted in his seat, his honest face creased with confusion. Poirot, you've been hinting at this for days, but I still don't see it. For murders, all following this alphabetical pattern Andover, Bexhill, Churston, Doncaster. Surely it's the work of a maniac, someone like his eyes flicked to Cust, who flinched as if struck. Poirot raised a hand, silencing his friend with a gentle but firm gesture. Patience, Hastings. The little grey cells, they have been at work, and they have uncovered a truth most ingenious. Allow me to guide you through the labyrinth of this killer's mind. He paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking against the hardwood floor, each step deliberate, as if measuring the weight of his words. Let us begin with the letters, the taunting missives, signed A.B.C. They were precise, were they not? Typed with care, posted with forethought, each announcing a crime in a town beginning with the next letter of the alphabet, and beside each victim an A.B.C. railway guide, open to the page of the town in question. A pattern so clear, so bold, it seemed to scream madness. But mise à mise, madness is not always what it seems. Megan Barnard leaned forward, her auburn hair catching the firelight, her voice sharp with barely contained fury. Are you saying this wasn't random? My sister, Betty, was chosen for a reason. Poirot turned to her, his expression softening, though his eyes remained piercing. Mademoiselle, your sister's death was no accident, nor was it the whim of a lunatic. It was a piece in a puzzle, a note in a symphony composed by a mind most calculating. Franklin Clark, lounging with studied ease in his chair, raised an eyebrow. His voice was smooth, almost amused. A symphony, Monsieur Poirot. You make it sound like a work of art. Surely you're not suggesting one of us here orchestrated. This, Poirot's lips curled into a faint, enigmatic smile. Art, Monsieur Clark, is often a mask for ambition. Let us examine the facts, shall we? For murders, Alice Asher, beaten in her shop in Andover. Betty Barnard, strangled on the beach in Bexhill. Sir Carmichael Clark, stabbed in his home in Churston. And George Earlsfield killed in a cinema in Doncaster. Each crime, at first glance, fits the alphabetical pattern. Yet, there is a discord, a note that does not belong. Inspector Crone cleared his throat, his voice clipped and impatient. The Doncaster murder, you mean? The deviation from the D pattern? We've been over this, Poirot. It's a sign the killer's slipping, getting sloppy. Sloppy. Poirot's tone was laced with disdain, though his manners remained impeccable. Nan, Inspector, the killer is not sloppy. The killer is audacious. The murder of George Earlsfield was no mistake. It was a flourish, a deliberate twist to throw us off the scent. Japp, who had been silent until now, removed the pipe from his mouth and leaned forward. You're saying the Doncaster killing was a ruse, but why? The pattern was working. Why break it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. To understand why, we must first ask, who benefits from these crimes? Alice Asher, a poor shopkeeper. Betty Barnard, a carefree waitress. George Earlsfield, a humble usher. These victims seemed random, unconnected. But Sir Carmichael Clarke, a man of wealth, of influence, with a fortune tied to his name, his death, Mies Amos, is the key. Franklin Clarke's smile faltered, though he quickly recovered, adjusting his cufflinks with a casual air. My brother's death was a tragedy, Poirot, but to suggest it's the centerpiece of some grand scheme, that's a stretch, even for you. Poirot ignored the interruption, his voice rising with a quiet intensity. Let us consider the sequence. Alice Asher's death in Andover was brutal but simpler blow to the head, an ABC guide left as a calling card. Betty Bott murder in Bexhill was more intimate, a strangling that spoke of personal rage. Sir Carmichael's death in Churston was precise, a single stab wound to the heart. And then George Earlsfield in Doncaster, man who did not fit the alphabetical pattern. Why? Because Mies Amos, the pattern was never the true motive. It was a veil, a distraction to hide the real target. Sir Carmichael Clarke. Megan's eyes widened, her voice trembling with realization. You're saying someone used the other murders to cover up killing Sir Carmichael. But who, and why? Poirot turned to Alexander Bonaparte Cust, who sat hunched in his chair, his face pale and slick with sweat. Monsieur Cust, you have been quiet. Perhaps you wish to tell us about your travels. Andover, Bexhill, Churston, Doncaster. You were seen near each crime scene, were you not? Cust's hands shook violently, his stammer worsening under Poirot's gaze. I don't know what you mean, sir. I sell stockings. I travel. Yes, but I couldn't. Poirot's voice softened, almost paternal. Calm yourself, Monsieur Cust. I do not believe you are the killer. Nan, you are a pawn, carefully placed to take the blame. Your initials, A.B.C, your typewriter used for the letters. Your presence at each scene. It is all too perfect, too convenient. Someone has orchestrated this to make you the scapegoat. Cust's eyes darted around the room, his voice a desperate whisper. But who? Why me? Poirot turned slowly, his gaze settling on Franklin Clarke. The room seemed to hold its breath, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Monsieur Franklin Clarke, Poirot said, his voice now a whip-crack of accusation. You are a man of ambition, are you not? A man who stood to gain a fortune upon your brother's death, a fortune that would secure your future, your ventures, your dreams. Franklin's laugh was sharp, brittle. This is absurd, Poirot. You're grasping at straws. I loved my brother. I had no reason to. No reason. Poirot's voice cut through the protest like a blade. Let us examine your circumstances, Monsieur Clarke. Your brother, Sir Carmichael, was a man of considerable wealth, with no direct heir save yourself. His death would bring you a fortune, but a single murder would draw suspicion. So, you devised a plan, a series of murders, cloaked in the guise of a madman's rampage, to ensure that Carmichael's death would be but one of many, unnoticed in the chaos. Hastings gasped, his voice barely a whisper. Good Lord, Poirot, are you saying Franklin planned all this? Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Franklin's face. Why, Hastings, the A.B.C. murders were a masquerade, a grand illusion to disguise the murder of Sir Carmichael Clarke. Alice Asher, Betty Barnard, George Earlsfield, these were sacrifices, chosen to create the illusion of a serial killer. The letters, the A.B.C. guides, the alphabetical progressional, designed to lead us astray. Franklin rose from his chair, his face flushed with indignation. This is slander. You have no proof, Poirot. None. Poirot's smile was cold, unyielding. Proof, Monsieur Clarke. Oh, I have proof. Let us begin with the letters. They were typed on a machine identical to the one found in Monsieur Cust's lodgings. But you, Monsieur Clark, had access to that machine. You visited Cust, did you not? Under the pretense of buying stockings, you borrowed his typewriter, knowing it would tie him to the crimes. Franklin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his eyes darting to the door as if calculating an escape. And then Poirot continued, "There is the matter of the Doncaster murder. Why kill George Elsfield, a man whose name does not begin with D? Because, Monsieur Clark, you needed to ensure Cust's presence at the scene, to solidify his guilt. You knew Cust would be in Doncaster, selling his wares. You followed him, planted the letter, and struck when the opportunity arose. But you made a mistake, a small one, but fatal. The postmark on the Doncaster letter was from a town you passed through the day before, not Doncaster itself. A detail only someone traveling with Cust would know." Megan Barnard stood, her voice shaking with rage. "You killed my sister too. Cover up your greed, you monster." Franklin's composure cracked, his voice rising in desperation. "You can't prove any of this. It's all conjecture. Poirot, you're weaving a story, nothing more." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Conjecture. Nan, Monsieur Clark, let us speak of the belt found at Bexhill, the one used to strangle Mademoiselle Barnard, a belt remarkably similar to one you were seen wearing in Churston days before the murder, and the knife used on your brother, a rare blade, one you purchased in London under an assumed name. The shopkeeper, he remembers you well." Japp stepped forward, his voice gruff, but triumphant. "We've checked the records, Clark. The knife, the belt, the typewriter, it all points to you. And we found a draft of one of the A.B.C. letters in your flat, hidden in a book. Careless, that." Franklin's face drained of color, his hands clenching into fists. "This is a setup. Christie's the one, his initials, his typewriter." Poirot shook his head, his voice now a quiet lament. "Monsieur Cust is a man broken by life, a man easily manipulated. You chose him because he was vulnerable, because his initials fit your scheme. You planted the evidence, ensured he was seen at each scene, and sent the letters to me, knowing I would pursue the puzzle. You wanted me to chase the shadow of A.B.C., never suspecting the true motive." Cust let out a sob, his voice choked with relief. "I didn't do it. I swear, I didn't." Megan placed a hand on Cust's shoulder, her eyes blazing as she glared at Franklin. "You used him. You used all of us." Franklin's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him. His voice was barely audible, a broken whisper. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. Carmichael, he was going to cut me out, give it all to charity. I had no choice." Poirot's expression softened, but only slightly. "There is always a choice, Monsieur Clark. You chose greed over humanity, and for that, you will answer." Japp moved forward, handcuffs glinting in the firelight. "Franklin Clark, you're under arrest for the murders of Alice Asher, Betty Barnard, Sir Carmichael Clark, and George Earlsfield." As Japp led Franklin away, the room fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over the group like a shroud. Megan sank into her chair, tears streaming down her face, while Cust stared blankly at the floor, his trembling hands finally still. Hastings looked to Poirot, his voice thick with emotion. "You did it, old chap. You saw through it all." Poirot turned to the window, gazing out at the fog-shrouded city. "The little grey cells. Hastings, they see what others cannot. But there is no joy in this victory. For lives lost, a family broken, a man's innocence nearly destroyed. The cost of truth, it is always heavy." The fire crackled softly, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the moment. Hastings placed a hand on Poirot's shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie. "You saved Cust, Poirot. You brought justice. That's something." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant but resolute. "Oui, mon ami, justice is served. And now, we rest until the next puzzle calls." The room faded into silence, the echoes of Poirot's words lingering like the final notes of a symphony. The A.B.C. murders were solved, the alphabetical reckoning complete, and Hercule Poirot, the master of order, stood victorious once more. Audiobook's soundscape swelled with a gentle piano melody, fading into the soft hum of the London night. Hugh Fraser's voice, rich and resonant, delivered the final lines with a gravitas that left listeners breathless. The case closed, the truth unveiled, and the world set right by the brilliance of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 1. The ominous missive. The rain fell in a steady, whispering curtain over London, draping the city in a sheen of silver. It was the sort of evening that made one crave the warmth of a hearth, the clink of a teacup, and the comfort of routine. In the elegant flat at 56B, Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot sat by his fireplace, its flames casting flickering shadows across the polished mahogany of his desk. The room was a study in order, books aligned with military precision, a silver inkstand gleaming, and a single orchid in a crystal vase lending a touch of the exotic. Yet, as the rain pattered against the tall windows, an undercurrent of unease stirred the air. Poirot, immaculate in a tailored suit of charcoal grey, adjusted his pince-nez and gazed at the letter in his hand. It was not the first time he had read it that evening, nor the second. The paper was cheap, the kind one might find in a stationer's bargain bin, but the words typed upon it were anything but ordinary. They danced in his mind, sharp and taunting, like the opening notes of a symphony he could not yet name. Mon ami, came a voice from the doorway, warm and familiar, tinged with the faintest note of exasperation. Captain Arthur Hastings, pure, steadfast friend, stood there, his overcoat damp from the rain, his sandy hair slightly dishevelled. "You've been staring at that wretched letter for hours. It's probably some crackpot playing a prank. You know how these things go." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle signal of amusement or irritation. Hastings could never quite tell. A prank, Hastings? Nan, the mind that crafted this is no idle jester. Observe, he held the letter aloft, its edges catching, the firelight, the precision of the typewriter, the deliberate choice of words. This is a challenge, mon cher, and Hercule Poirot does not ignore a challenge. Hastings crossed the room, his boots leaving faint wet marks on the polished floor, and sank into the armchair opposite Poirot. He leaned forward, his hazel eyes narrowing as he scanned the letter. The text was stark, almost clinical, typed in a bold, unadorned font. "Dear Mr. Poirot, you fancy yourself the cleverest of detectives, do you not? Let us test your little grey cells. Look out for Andover, on the 21st of this month. The game begins with a yours, A.B.C. Cryptic nonsense," Hastings muttered, tossing the letter onto the desk. Andover, of all places. What's in Andover? Nothing but sheep and tobacco shops. And this A.B.C. business, what's it supposed to mean? A code, a name. Poirot's eyes gleamed, sharp as cut glass. "It is precisely the simplicity that intrigues me, Hastings. Why Andover? Why the 21st? And why mon ami addressed this to me? The writer knows of Hercule Poirot, knows of my reputation. This is no random scribble. It is a gauntlet thrown at my feet." The clock on the mantel struck 8, its chimes resonant and deliberate, like a warning. Poirot rose, his movements precise, and crossed to the window. The rain had thickened, blurring the gaslights of Whitehaven Mansions into smears of gold. "The 21st is tomorrow," he said softly, almost to himself. "We must be prepared." Hastings frowned, rubbing his chin. "Prepared for what? You're not seriously thinking of dashing off to Andover on a whim, are you? It's probably some bored clerk having a laugh." Poirot turned, his expression one of patient indulgence. Hastings, you see, but you do not observe. A bored clerk does not write with such intent. This letter, it has a rhythm, a purpose. It is the first move in a game, and I, Hercule Poirot, intend to play." The evening passed in a haze of discussion, with Hastings proposing increasingly outlandish theories, a disgruntled former client, a rival detective, even a secret society, while Poirot listened, his fingers steepled, his mind clearly elsewhere. The letter lay between them, an unspoken challenge, its words echoing in the quiet room. By morning the rain had cleared, leaving London sparkling under a tentative sun. Poirot, ever the creature of habit, emerged from his bedroom in a pristine morning coat, his moustache waxed to perfection. Over breakfast croissants and café au lait, served by his impeccable valet, George Poirot announced his decision. "We go to Andover, Hastings. The train leaves at 10. Pack lightly, but bring your revolver. One does not meet a challenge unarmed." Hastings, midway through a bite of croissant, nearly choked. "Revolver? Good Lord, Poirot, you're taking this far too seriously. It's just a letter." "Just a letter," Poirot echoed, his voice low and deliberate. "And yet, mon ami, I feel it in my bones. This is no jest. The little grey cells, they are restless." The train to Andover was a rattling affair, its compartments filled with the hum of conversation and the scent of damp wool. Poirot sat by the window, his eyes fixed on the passing countryside, while Hastings flipped through a newspaper, muttering about the lack of cricket scores. The letter, now tucked safely in Poirot's breast pocket, seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Andover greeted them with the bustle of a small market town, its streets lined with red brick shops and the occasional horse-drawn cart. The air carried the earthy tang of autumn, mingling with the smoke of chimneys. Poirot, undeterred by the town's unassuming charm, led the way to the police station, his cane tapping a purposeful rhythm on the cobblestones. Inspector Crome, a wiry man, with a face like weathered granite, greeted them with thinly veiled skepticism. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice clipped, "I received your telegram. Frankly, I don't see what a London detective can do here. That letter of yours sounds like a hoax. We've had no reports of trouble." Poirot's smile was polite, but his eyes were steel. "Inspector, I do not come on a whim. The letter specifies Andover today. I suggest we remain vigilant." Crome shrugged, clearly unconvinced, but agreed to accompany them on a patrol of the town's main street. The trio moved through the crowd, Poirot's sharp gaze darting from face to face, as if seeking the shadow of A.B.C. among the market-goers. Hastings, ever practical, scanned the shop signs, noting a tobacconist's called Asher's Emporium. "Perhaps we should start there," Hastings suggested, pointing. "If this A.B.C. fellow is playing games, a shop with an A name seems a likely spot." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "An excellent observation, Hastings. Let us see what Asher's Emporium holds." The shop was a narrow, dimly lit space, its shelves crammed with tobacco tins, pipes, and jars of sweets. Behind the counter stood Alice Asher, a woman in her late 50s, her face lined with the weariness of long hours. Her grey hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her eyes, though sharp, carried a flicker of unease as the men entered. "Good day, madame," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my associate, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Crome. We are making inquiries. Have you received anything unusual? Perhaps a letter?" Alice's hands stilled on the counter, her fingers tightening around a rag. "A letter? No, nothing like that. Just bills and orders." "Why do you ask?" Poirot's gaze softened, but his questions were precise. "Have you noticed any strangers in Andover, madam? Anyone who seemed out of place?" Alice hesitated, her eyes flicking to the window. "There was a man yesterday, lingering outside. Tall, wore a dark coat. Didn't come in, just watched. I thought he was waiting for someone." Hastings exchanged a glance with Poirot, his pulse quickening. "Did he leave anything? Say anything?" Alice shook her head. "No, he was gone by closing. Probably nothing." Poirot thanked her and stepped outside, his expression thoughtful. The street was alive with activity, vendors calling, children darting between carts, but Poirot's focus was absolute. "We must return tonight, Hastings," he murmured. "If the letter speaks true, the 21st is not yet over." The day passed in a blur of inquiries, with Crome grudgingly checking local reports and Hastings trailing Poirot through Andover's alleys. By evening, the town had settled into a quiet hum, the market stalls packed away, the streets lit by gaslights. Poirot insisted on returning to Asher's Emporium, his intuition unshakable. As they approached, the shop's windows were dark, the sign flipped to closed, but something was amiss. The door was ajar, a sliver of shadow spilling onto the pavement. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane, and he gestured for Hastings to draw his revolver. "Careful, mon ami," Poirot whispered. "The little grey cells, they are screaming." Inside, the shop was silent, the air thick with the scent of tobacco and something sharp. Alice Asher lay behind the counter, her body slumped, her throat marked by a brutal gash. Beside her, pristine and mocking, lay an A.B.C. railway guide, open to the Andover page. A broken pipe rested on the floor, its bowl cracked, as if dropped. In a struggle, Hastings swore under his breath, his revolver trembling in his hand. Crome, pale but professional, knelt to check for a pulse, then shook his head. "She's gone. Dead for an hour, maybe two." Poirot's face was a mask of controlled fury, his eyes scanning the scene. "The letter was no jest," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This A.B.C. has struck, and they have struck at me. But they will find, Inspector, that Hercule Poirot is not so easily outwitted." The police arrived, their lanterns casting stark beams across the shop. Poirot moved with purpose, noting the angle of the pipe, the undisturbed shelves, the absence of theft. This was no robbery, he said, his voice rising with conviction. This was a message. For Andover, for Alice. The game, it has begun. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the gaslight, his moustache a sharp silhouette. Now, mon ami, we return to London, we study this A.B.C, and we prepare for the next move. The little grey cells, they will not rest until this killer is found. The rain began again, a soft drizzle that blurred the edges of Andover streets. But for the path was clear. The game had begun, and he would not lose. Chapter 2. The Andover Enigma. The train to Andover rattled through the English countryside, its rhythm a relentless pulse against the quiet dread settling over Hercule Poirot. He sat by the window, his gloved hands folded neatly over the silver head of his cane, his eyes fixed on the blurred green of passing fields. The cryptic letter, with its mocking A.B.C. signature, lay folded in his pocket, its words etched into his mind. Look out for Andover. On the 21st, the date had passed yesterday, and the morning's paper confirmed the grim reality. Alice Asher, a tobacconist, found dead in her shop. An A.B.C. railway guide left beside her body like a taunting calling card. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated opposite, shifted uncomfortably, his newspaper rustling. Poirot, you're awfully quiet. What's brewing in those little grey cells of yours? His voice, warm but edged with unease, broke the carriage's hum. Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile flickering. Mon ami, I am arranging the facts, as one arranges a bouquet. Each petal must be placed just so, or the beauty, the truth eludes us. His Belgian accent, precise and melodic, carried a weight that made Hastings lean forward. Facts. We've got a letter, a murder, and a railway guide. Seems more like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Precisement, Poirot said, tapping his cane lightly against the floor. And yet, the missing pieces, they whisper to us already. This A.B.C, he is not a fool. He wishes to play a game, and I, Hercule Poirot, am his opponent. The train's whistle shrieked, and Andover's modest station came into view, its platform bustling with porters and passengers under a grey, heavy sky. As they disembarked, the air carried the sharp bite of autumn, mingling with the faint scent of coal smoke. Hastings adjusted his scarf, his breath visible. Grim place. For a murder, he muttered. Murder. Hastings chooses no scenery. It is the mind of the killer that paints the scene. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he scanned the station, noting a boy hawking newspapers with headlines blaring Alice Asher's death. Come, we must see this tobacco shop for ourselves. The walk to Andover's High Street was brisk, the town's quaint charm overshadowed by whispered conversations among passers-by. The tobacco shop, tucked between a bakery and a cobbler, was unremarkable save for the knot of curious onlookers and a stern-faced constable guarding the door. A sign above read Asher's Tobaccos, its paint-chipped but proud. The constable, recognizing Poirot's name from a prior case, nodded curtly and let them pass. Inside, the shop was a time capsule of stale smoke and faded dreams. Shelves lined with tobacco tins gleamed dully under a single hanging bulb, and glass jars of pipe cleaners and cigarette papers stood like silent sentinels. The air was thick with the ghosts of Virginia leaf and cloves, undercut by a faint, metallic tangblood. Behind the counter, a chalk outline marked where Alice Asher had fallen, her body now gone to the morgue. The A.B.C. railway guide, its cover dog-eared, lay on the counter, open to Andover's train schedule. Inspector Cromwell, a wiry man with a clipped mustache and a voice to match, greeted them with a frown. Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, didn't expect Scotland Yard to call in the cavalry so soon. His tone dripped with skepticism, his eyes narrowing at Poirot's polished appearance. Cavalry? Nan, Poirot replied, his voice smooth as silk. I am here because the killer has invited me, Inspector. This letter, he produced the folded paper from his pocket, is his opening gambit. Crome skimmed the letter, his lips pursing. A crank, most likely. We've had our share of lunatics writing to the police, but this, he gestured to the chalk outline, is real enough. Alice Asher, 62, bludgeoned with a heavy object. No robbery, nothing taken but her life. Poirot's gaze swept the shop, lingering on a broken pipe lying near the counter, its bowl cracked as if stomped underfoot. And this pipe, Inspector, it is not hers, I presume. Crome shrugged. Her husband's, we think. Franz Asher, German fellow, runs a pub down the road. He's in a state, says he was at the pub all evening. We're checking his alibi. Poirot knelt, examining the pipe without touching it. Curio, a pipe broken in haste perhaps, or left to mislead. His fingers hovered over the shards, as if coaxing secrets from the air. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, coughed. Could be the murder weapon, Poirot. Solid enough to do damage. Then, Hastings, too light, too fragile. The blow that killed Madame Asher was precise, delivered with force. This pipe is a distraction, a prop in our killer's theatre. Poirot rose, brushing his trousers. Inspector, what of witnesses? Crome gestured to the door. A neighbor, Mrs. Fowler, saw a man leaving the shop around closing time. Tall, dark coat, face obscured by a hat. Didn't think much of it until the body was found. May we speak with this Mrs. Fowler? Poirot's voice was polite but firm, his eyes alight with purpose. Mrs. Fowler lived in a narrow cottage across the street, its windows adorned with lace curtains that twitched as they approached. She was a stout woman in her 50s, her hands wringing a dishcloth as she ushered them into a parlor cluttered with porcelain figurines. Her voice, high and nervous, filled the room. I saw him. I did. Just after 7, as I was locking up my own shop. He came out of Alice's quick-like, pulling his hat low. Thought he was just a customer. But now, she shuddered, her eyes darting to the window. Poirot leaned forward, his tone soothing. Madame, describe this man. Si vous plot. Every detail, it is vital. She frowned, her fingers twisting the cloth tighter. Tall, over 6 foot, I'd say. Wore a long coat, dark green or black, and a felt hat, tilted so I couldn't see his face. Moved fast, like he didn't want to be noticed. Turned down the alley by the bakery. Poirot's nod was almost imperceptible. And Madame Asher, you knew her well. Well enough, Mrs. Fowler said, her voice softening. Alice was a tough old bird. Ran that shop alone after Franz took to drinking. They fought like cats, those two. She'd complain he spent all their money at the pub, but she never left him. Stubborn, she was. Mercy, Madame. Poirot stood, his expression unreadable. Your eyes, they have helped us greatly. Back in the shop, Poirot paced, his cane tapping a slow rhythm. Hastings watched, sensing the gears turning in his friend's mind. What's got you so pensive, Poirot? The pipe, the stranger, everything. Hastings, the letter, the guide, the pipe, the stranger. There are threads in a tapestry, woven with care. This killer, he does not strike at random. He chooses Andover, he chooses Alice Asher, and he leaves his A.B.C. guide to ensure we see his pattern. But why? Why announce his crime? To taunt you, perhaps, Hastings ventured. He knows your reputation. Poirot's eyes sparkled. We, perhaps, but there is more. This murder, it is too neat, too staged. The broken pipe, it is not the weapon, but it is meant to suggest Franz Asher's guilt. Yet Franz, he is at his pub, surrounded by witnesses. The stranger, Mrs. Fowler, saw too convenient, too fleeting. I suspect our A.B.C. wishes us to chase. Shadows. Inspector Crome, rejoining them, scoffed. Shadows. We've got a dead woman and a clear suspect in her husband. You're overcomplicating it, Mr. Poirot. Poirot's smile was thin. Simplicity, Inspector, is the refuge of the lazy mind. The truth, it hides in the details. Tell me, what do we know of Alice Asher's life, her enemies, her secrets? Crome sighed, flipping open his notebook. Not much to tell. She ran the shop for 20 years, lived above it with Franz. No children, no close friends. Kept to herself, mostly. Neighbors say she was sharp-tongued but fair. Franz, though he's got a temper, and they argued often. Last week, she threw a plate at him, according to Mrs. Fowler. Interesting, Poirot murmured. And her customers? Any regulars who might have lingered? A few, Crome said. Mostly old men buying pipe tobacco. There's one fellow, a Mr. Riddle, who came in daily. Says he was fond of Alice, but he's 70 and half blind, hardly a suspect. Poirot's fingers drummed his cane. And yet, we must consider all possibilities. This, Mr. Riddle, I wish to speak with him. They found Mr. Riddle at the local tea shop, a frail figure hunched over a cup of Earl Grey. His voice, reedy and tremulous, carried the weight of grief. Alice was a good sort. Always saved me the best Virginia blend. Can't believe she's gone. His milky eyes watered as he recounted his last visit, 2 days before the murder. She seemed off, you know, jumpy, like she was expecting trouble. Trouble. Poirot's voice sharpened. Did she mention anyone? A stranger, perhaps? Riddle shook his head. Not a name, but she said someone had been asking questions about her, poking around the shop. Made her uneasy. I told her to tell Franz, but she just laughed it off. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. This stranger, Monsieur Riddle, did she describe him? Not really. Just said he was nosy. Kept asking about her hours, her stock. She thought he might be a taxman or some such. The interview yielded little more, but Poirot's silence on the walk back to the shop was heavy with thought. The high street was quieter now. The crowd dispersed, leaving only the constable and a stray cat prowling the alley. Poirot paused at the shop's door, his gaze fixed on the A.B.C. guide, still lying on the counter. Hastings, he said softly, this guide, it is the key. Why leave it? To boast, to confuse. Point us somewhere we have not yet looked. Hastings frowned. It's just a train schedule, Poirot. Common as dirt. Non mon ami. Nothing in this crime is common. The guide is a message, a signature. Our killer wishes us to see his alphabet, to follow his trail. But I, Hercule Poirot, will not be led so easily. As dusk fell, they visited Franz Ascher's pub, a dimly lit hole called the Black Boar. The air was thick with ale and sweat. The patrons, a mix of labourers and drunks. Franz, a burly man with a red face and bloodshot eyes, slumped behind the bar. His German accent was thick, his voice raw with grief or guilt. I didn't kill her, he growled, slamming a pint glass down. I was here all night, ask anyone. Poirot's questions were gentle but probing, drawing out Franz's story. He and Alice had married young, but years of his drinking and her sharp tongue had soured their bond. She wanted me out, he admitted, said I was dragging her down, but I loved her, in my way. And this pipe, Poirot said, producing a sketch of the broken one. It is yours. Franz nodded, his jaw tightening. Lost it a week ago. Thought I'd left it at home, but he trailed off, his eyes narrowing. You think I left it there, to make it look like I did it? I think nothing, Monsieur Poirot said smoothly. I observed that someone wishes us to think many things. The night ended with Poirot and Hastings at a modest inn, the only lodging in Andover, willing to take late arrivals. Over a supper of cold beef and ale, Poirot laid out his thoughts, his voice low and intense. This murder, Hastings, it is not a crime of passion. It is a performance. The letter, the guide, the pipe, all props in a play written by a mind that craves control. Alice Ascher was not chosen by chance. She was a piece on the board, selected for a reason we do not yet see. Hastings set down his fork, his appetite gone. But why her, a tobacconist in a sleepy town? What's the connection? That, mon ami, is the enigma, and I will solve it. The killer, he has made his first move, but he does not know Hercule Poirot. I will find his pattern, his purpose, and I will end his game. Chapter 3. The second letter. The London morning was cloaked in a damp haze, the kind that clung to the skin and dulled the clatter of horse-drawn cabs on Baker Street. Inside Hercule Poirot's immaculate flat, the air was warm, scented with the faint musk of polished mahogany and the lingering bitterness of his morning tisane. The great detective sat at his desk, his small, precise hands folded over a single sheet of paper letter, its edges crisp, its words taunting. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, stood by the window, his silhouette framed against the grey drizzle, his voice carrying a familiar blend of curiosity and exasperation. Another one, Poirot. Surely it's some crackpot playing a game, Hastings said, his tone bright but edged with doubt. The words hung in the air, unanswered for a moment. As Poirot's green eyes scanned the letter again, his lips pursed in a way that suggested both irritation and intrigue. This is no game, mon ami, Poirot replied, his Belgian accent sharpening each syllable. Or rather, it is a game of the most dangerous kind. Listen. He lifted the letter, his voice dropping to a theatrical cadence, as if the words themselves demanded reverence. Monsieur Poirot, you fancy yourself clever, do you not? Let us see how you fare in Bexhill on the 25th. A.B.C. Hastings turned, his brow furrowing. Bexhill, the seaside town. What's this fellow on about? Poirot set the letter down with a deliberate tap, his fingers drumming a soft rhythm on the desk. It is the second letter, Hastings. The first spoke of Andover, and there we found poor Madame Ascher, her life snuffed out with brutal precision. Now Bexhill, The killer is methodical, alphabetical. He mocks me, yes, but he also reveals himself. The room seemed to tighten with the weight of Poirot's words. Hastings crossed to the desk, his boots muffled on the thick rug, and peered at the letter. The handwriting was neat, almost mechanical, typed on a machine that left faint smudges of ink. A detail Poirot had already noted with a gleam in his eye. "We must go to Bexhill at once," Poirot declared, rising with a swiftness that belied his fastidious demeanor. "The 25th is tomorrow. There is no time to waste." The journey to Bexhill was a blur of steam and clatter, the train's rhythm a counterpoint to Hastings' restless thoughts. He narrated the scene with a warmth that drew listeners into the carriage, his voice painting the rolling Sussex hills, their green dulled by the persistent mist. Poirot, seated opposite, was a study in focus, his eyes fixed on a pocket map of Bexhill, his lips moving silently as he murmured calculations. The soundscape swelled whistling steam, the creak of leather seats, the distant cry of a station master, immersing the listener. In the urgency of their mission, Bexhill greeted them with the briny tang of the sea and the mournful cry of gulls. The town was alive with summer visitors, their laughter spilling from the pier, where colourful flags snapped in the wind. Yet, beneath the gaiety, a shadow loomed. Poirot and Hastings made their way to the police station, a squat brick building that smelled of damp plaster and ink. Inspector Crome, a man whose angular face and clipped speech suggested a permanent state of impatience, met them with barely concealed skepticism. "Monsieur Poirot," Crome said, his voice flat as he extended a hand. "I read about the Andover business. Nasty affair. But you're wasting your time here. No crime's been reported, and I've got men patrolling the town." Poirot's smile was tight, almost pitying. "Inspector, the crime has not yet occurred, but it will. Tomorrow, if the letter is to be believed." Crome's laugh was a bark, sharp and dismissive. "A letter? You're chasing shadows, sir. Bexhill's quiet as a church." "Shadows, Inspector, often conceal the truth," Poirot replied, his voice soft but unyielding. "I suggest you prepare your men. The killer will strike, and he will leave his Marcan A.B.C. railway guide open to Bexhill." The inspector's face hardened, but he nodded, dismissing them with a curt gesture. Hastings, narrating, captured the tension in Crome's clipped farewell, his voice tinged with frustration as he recounted Poirot's unshakable certainty. The two men stepped back into the salty air, the town's cheerfulness now feeling like a brittle mask. That evening, they took rooms at the Seaview Inn, a quaint establishment with creaking floorboards and windows that rattled in the sea breeze. Hastings' narration brought the inn to life, the clink of glasses in the bar below, the murmur of locals swapping stories, the faint strains of a gramophone playing a jazzy tune. Poirot, however, was restless, pacing their shared sitting room, his mind a whirl of unseen connections. "Hastings," he said, pausing by the window, where the moon cast silver ripples on the sea, "this killer is not merely a murderer. He is a performer, staging his crimes for an audience. Morse, Hercule Poirot. But why? Why taunt me with letters? Why the alphabetical order?" Hastings, sprawled in an armchair, ventured a guess. "Perhaps he's mad, Poirot, a lunatic with a grudge." Nan, Poirot snapped, his voice sharp as a whip. "Madness may drive him, but there is method here. The A.B.C. guide is his signature, his flourish. It is personal, yet impersonal. A paradox, Hastings, and in that paradox lies the key." Sleep eluded them both, the hours marked by the distant crash of waves and the occasional creak of the inn's timbers. When dawn broke on the 25th, Bexhill was bathed in a golden haze, the sea sparkling as if unaware of the darkness poised to descend. Poirot and Hastings walked the promenade, their footsteps echoing on the wooden boards, the air thick with the scent of fried fish and candy. Hastings' narration painted the scene vividly, the chatter of holidaymakers, the squeal of children chasing gulls, the rhythmic slap of waves against the shore. It was mid-afternoon when the scream shattered the town's tranquility. The sound came from the beach, a narrow strip of shingle where the tide lapped gently. Hastings' voice trembled as he described the crowd partying, revealing a figure crumpled on the stones, a young woman, her vibrant red scarf stark against her pale, lifeless face. Poirot was at her side in an instant, his small frame radiating authority as he waved back on lookers. Betty Barnard, a bystander, whispered, her voice breaking, "She's a waitress at the pier, calf, always so cheerful." Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands careful not to disturb the scene. Betty's eyes were open, staring blankly at the sky, her throat bruised by the cord that had ended her life. Beside her, half buried in the shingle, lay an A.B.C. railway guide, its pages open to Bexhill's train schedule. The sight sent a chill through Hastings, his narration slowing, each word heavy with dread. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his voice low but resonant, as if speaking to the killer himself. "You are bold, A.B.C., but you will not outwit Hercule Poirot." The police arrived, Crome's face now pale, his earlier skepticism replaced by grim focus. He barked orders, his men cordoning off the beach as holidaymakers whispered and pointed. Hastings' narration captured the shift in atmosphere, the laughter silenced, the gulls' cries now ominous, the sea's rhythm a relentless dirge. Poirot, undeterred, examined the scene with meticulous care, noting the precise knot in the cord, the undisturbed shingle around Betty's body, the absence of footprints save her own. "She was lured here," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. This was no chance encounter. The killer knew her habits. Crome bristled. "You're jumping to conclusions, Poirot. We'll question the locals, check for witnesses." "Hastings," he said softly, "this guide, it is the key. Why leave it, to boast, to confuse, or to point us somewhere we have not yet looked?" Hastings frowned. "It's just a train schedule, Poirot, common as dirt." "Nan, mon ami, nothing in this crime is common. The guide is a message, a signature. Our killer wishes us to see his alphabet, to follow his trail. But I, Hercule Poirot, will not be led so easily." As dusk fell, they visited Franz Ashe's pub, a dimly lit hole called the Black Boar. The air was thick with ale and sweat, the patrons a mix of labourers and drunks. Franz, a burly man with a red face and bloodshot eyes, slumped behind the bar. His German accent was thick, his voice raw with grief or guilt. "I didn't kill her," he growled, slamming a pint glass down. "I was here all night. Ask anyone." Poirot's questions were gentle but probing, drawing out Franz's story. He and Alice had married young, but years of his drinking and her sharp tongue had soured their bond. "She wanted me out," he admitted, "said I was dragging her down, but I loved her, in my way. And this pipe," Poirot said, producing a sketch of the broken one, "it is yours." Franz nodded, his jaw tightening. "Lost it, a week ago. Thought I'd left it at home. But," he trailed off, his eyes narrowing, "you think I left it there, to make it look like I did it?" "I think nothing, Monsieur Poirot said smoothly. I observe that someone wishes us to think many things." The night ended with Poirot and Hastings at a modest inn, the only lodging in Andover willing to take late arrivals. Over a supper of cold beef and ale, Poirot laid out his thoughts, his voice low and intense. "This murder, Hastings, it is not a crime of passion. It is a performance. The letter, the guide, the pipe, all props in a play, written by a mind that craves control. Alice Ashe was not chosen by chance. She was a piece on the board, selected for a reason we do not yet see." Hastings set down his fork, his appetite gone. "But why her? A tobacconist in a sleepy town. What's the connection? That, mon ami, is the enigma, and I will solve it. The killer, he has made his first move, but he does not know Hercule Poirot. I will find his pattern, his purpose, and I will end his game." Chapter 4. Bexhill's Shadow. The train to Bexhill rattled along, its wheels screeching against the tracks like a banshee's wail, a fitting prelude to the grim task awaiting Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings. The carriage, bathed in the pale light of a late afternoon sun, smelled faintly of coal dust and leather. Poirot sat erect, his gloved hands folded over the silver head of his cane, his moustache impeccably trimmed, though his eyes betrayed a restless spark. Hastings beside him fidgeted with a crumpled newspaper, his face a canvas of worry. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a soft melody laced with steel, "you are like a schoolboy before an examination. Cease this agitation, it clouds the mind." Hastings managed a weak smile. "It's that letter, Poirot, that wretched A.B.C. fellow, taunting us with Bexhill. After Andover, after Alice Ashe, can't shake the feeling we're being led by the nose." Poirot's eyes narrowed, glinting like polished agate's lead. "Perhaps, but not blindly. The mind of Hercule Poirot is not so easily manipulated. This A.B.C., He thinks himself clever, but cleverness without method is a house built on sand. We shall see what Bexhill reveals. The train lurched to a stop, and the salty temps of the sea greeted them as they stepped onto the platform. Bexhill Annecy was a postcard come to life. Pastel-coloured bathing huts lined the shore. Gulls wheeled overhead, and the pier stretched into the horizon like a finger pointing to secrets. Yet, beneath the cheerful bustle, a shadow lingered. Word of Betty Barnard's murder had spread, and the town's vibrancy felt brittle, like glass ready to shatter. They made their way to the beach, where Betty had been found, guided by a young constable whose freckled face was taut with unease. Crime scene was cordoned off, a patch of shingle stained dark with tragedy. The waves hissed as they lapped at the pebbles, and the air carried a faint metallic scent, as if the sea itself mourned. Strangled, the constable said, his voice barely above a whisper. Poor lass. Found her just before dawn, lying there, with that cursed railway guide beside her. Open to Bexhill it was. Poirot knelt beside the marked spot, his black patent shoes sinking slightly into the damp shingle. His fingers, delicate as a pianist's, traced the air above the ground, as if coaxing secrets from the earth. The A.B.C. railway guide, he murmured, always the guide, a signature, but also a challenge. Tell me, constable, what of the girl, who was Betty Barnard? The constable shifted, glancing at Hastings, as if seeking permission. Waitress at the Seabreeze Cafe, sir. Lively sort, always smiling. Bit of a flirt, they say, but no harm in her. 22, lived with her sister Megan, in a flat above the chemist's. Poirot's gaze flicked to the horizon, where the pier's silhouette loomed. And this Seabreeze Cafe, it is near. Just up the promenade. Sir, you'll hear the gulls before you see it. The Seabreeze Cafe was a modest establishment, its windows adorned with lace curtains, and its air thick with the aroma of fried fish and strong tea. The lunch crowd had thinned, leaving a scattering of locals, nursing chipped mugs and whispering about the murder. At a corner table, Megan Barnard sat, her face pale as the cliffs beyond the town. Her auburn hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes rimmed, held a fire that caught Poirot's attention. Mademoiselle Barnard, Poirot began, removing his hat with a flourish. I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my friend, Captain Hastings. We are here to find justice for your sister. May we speak? Megan's lips tightened, but she nodded. Sit, if you must, but don't expect me to cry again. I've no tears left. Her voice was raw, like the wind off the sea, and Hastings felt a pang of sympathy. He pulled out a chair, his movements gentle, as if not to startle her. We're terribly sorry for your loss, he said. Anything you can tell us about Betty, anything at all might help. Megan's gaze darted to the window, where the pier's lights were beginning to glow against the dusk. Betty was bright, like a firecracker, always laughing, always drawing people in, men especially. She'd tease them, make them feel special, but it was never serious, not to her. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft, yet piercing. And did any of these men take her teasing seriously, mademoiselle? Was there one who lingered, perhaps, who watched her too closely? Megan hesitated, her fingers twisting a napkin into knots. There was a man, came to the cafe a few times. Last week, tall, dark coat, kept his hat low, never ordered much, just sat and stared at Betty. She laughed it off, said he was probably shy, but I didn't like his eyes. Cold, they were, like a shark's. Hastings scribbled in his notebook, his pencil scratching loudly in the quiet cafe. Did you see him after it happened? No, Megan said sharply, but I told the police. They didn't seem to care much. Said it was probably nothing. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as suppressed irritation. The police, they lack imagination, Poirot said. But I, Hercule Poirot, do not. Tell me, mademoiselle, did Betty have enemies, or perhaps a suitor who felt spurned? Megan shook her head, but her eyes flickered with doubt. No enemies. She was too kind for that. But there was Tommy Pierce, a lad from the pier, worked the arcade. He'd moon over her, bring her little trinkets. Betty humored him, but she wasn't interested. He got clingy sometimes. Poirot's fingers tapped a rhythm on the table. This Tommy Pierce. Where might we find him? At the pier, most likely. He's always there, fiddling with those machines. The pier was alive with the clatter of slot machines and the laughter of holidaymakers, a stark contrast to the somber task at hand. The arcade was a cavern of flashing, lights and tinny music, its air heavy with the scent of candy floss and sweat. Tommy Pierce was easy to spot, a lanky youth with a mop of sandy hair, hunched over a claw machine, his fingers greasy from tinkering. "Mr. Pierce," Poirot called, his voice cutting through the din like a knife. The boy jumped, nearly dropping his screwdriver. "Who are you?" Tommy asked, his eyes darting between Poirot and Hastings. His voice was high, nervous, like a cornered animal's. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We wish to speak of Betty Barnard." Tommy's face paled, and he took a step back, bumping into the machine. I heard what happened. Terrible thing. I didn't know her that well." Poirot's smile was thin, almost predatory. "And yet, you brought her gifts, Nan. Trinkets, tokens of affection. Tell me, did she return your feelings?" Tommy's cheeks flushed, and he looked away, his fingers twitching. "She was nice to me, always smiled, said thank you, but she was like that with everyone. I didn't hurt her, if that's what you're thinking." Hastings stepped forward, his tone gentle. "Nobody's accusing you, lad. Just tell us what you saw. Did you notice anyone odd around Betty? Someone watching her?" Tommy hesitated, then nodded slowly. "There was this bloke, older, maybe 30, wore a dark coat, like Megan said. I saw him at the cafe a few times, and once on the beach, near where..." His voice cracked, and he swallowed hard. "Near where it happened. He didn't look right. Kept his head down, like he didn't want to be seen." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this man, did he speak to Betty?" "Not that I saw, but he was always there, watching. I told Betty to be careful, but she just laughed, said I was being dramatic." The conversation was interrupted by a shout from the pier's edge. A fisherman, his face weathered as driftwood, waved them over. "You, the detective," he called, his voice rough as the sea. "Found something you might want to see." They followed him to a pile of nets near the pier's end, where the air was thick with the stench of fish and salt. The fisherman pointed to a discarded belt, half buried in the sand. It was leather, worn but sturdy, with a brass buckle glinting in the fading light. "Found it this morning," the fisherman said. "Didn't think much of it till I heard about the girl. They say she was strangled with something like that." Poirot examined the belt without touching it, his eyes scanning every crease and scratch. "Hastings," he said softly, "fetch the constable. This must be preserved." As Hastings hurried off, Poirot turned to the fisherman. "You have sharp eyes, monsieur. Did you see anyone near this spot recently? A man in a dark coat, perhaps?" The fisherman scratched his beard. "Can't say I did, but it's busy here. People coming and going, could have been anyone." When the constable arrived, Poirot instructed him to bag the belt and send it to Scotland Yard. "It may be nothing," he said to Hastings, as they walked back to the promenade, "but it may be everything. The killer, he leaves his mark, but he also leaves his mistakes." That evening, in their rented rooms above a Bexhill inn, Poirot paced before a crackling fire, his shadow dancing on the walls. Hastings sat at a small desk, transcribing notes, the scratch of his pen a counterpoint to the wind rattling the windows. "Witnesses will tell you little," Poirot countered, his eyes narrowing, "but the ABC guide, it speaks volumes. It is his calling card, his challenge. He wants us to follow." The investigation unfolded against the backdrop of fading daylight, the sky bruising purple as the tide crept higher. Hastings and Poirot visited the pier café, where Betty had worked. Its interior a cozy jumble of checkered tablecloths and chipped teacups. The manager, a wiry man named Tompkins, spoke in a hushed tone, his voice trembling as Fraser's narration gave it depth. "Betty was a gem," Tompkins said, wiping his hands on his apron. "Always chatting with the customers, making them laugh. She left last night after her shift. Said she was meeting someone on the beach." "Someone?" Poirot's voice was sharp, his eyes gleaming. "Did she say who?" Tompkins shook his head. "No, sir, just said it was a friend. She was smiling, like it was something special." Hastings' narration lingered on the weight of those words, the listener drawn into the mystery of Betty's final moments. Poirot pressed Tompkins for details, learning of a regular customer, a quiet man in a grey coat, who often lingered at Betty's tables, his face half hidden by a hat. The description was vague, maddeningly so, but Poirot's mind seized on it, his fingers twitching as if arranging invisible puzzle pieces. Back at the inn, the night was alive with sound, the distant hum of the pier's carousel, the soft thud of waves, the occasional shout of a regular. Hastings, narrating, captured Poirot's relentless energy, his voice pacing the room as he spoke of patterns and motives. "The killer chooses his victims with care," Poirot said, his accent thickening with intensity. "Alice Asher in Andover, an old woman with little to her name. Betty Barnard, young and vibrant, full of life. They are opposites, yet linked by this ABC madness." White Hastings ventured another theory, his voice hesitant. "Perhaps it's random, Poirot, a maniac picking names from the guide." "Random?" Poirot's laugh was sharp, almost scornful. "Non-Hastings. Randomness is the refuge of the lazy mind. There is purpose here, hidden in the alphabet's cold logic." The chapter's tension peaked as Poirot proposed a bold move. "We must form a legion," he declared, his voice rising with conviction. "The families of the victims, those who knew them best, they will help us see what we cannot. Alice's husband, Betty's sister, they will be our eyes and ears." Hastings' narration slowed, his tone reflecting awe at Poirot's audacity. The idea of uniting the bereaved was both daring and compassionate, a spark of hope in the darkness. Poirot drafted telegrams, his pen scratching furiously, summoning Megan Barnard, Betty's sister, and others to London. The soundscape shifted, the scratch of pen on paper, the crackle of the fire, the distant wail of a foghorn building, a sense of purpose. Chapter 5. Churston's tragedy. The train to Churston rattled along, its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to the storm brewing in Hercule Poirot's mind. Rain streaked the window beside him, blurring the Devon countryside into a watercolor of greens and greys. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, fidgeted with his newspaper, his voice breaking the silence. "I say, Poirot, this ABC fellow's got us chasing shadows. First Andover, then Bexhill, and now Churston. It's like he's playing chess with us and we're always a move behind." Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes narrowing. "Chess, mon ami, none. This is no game of kings and queens. It is a puzzle, a labyrinth of the mind. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall find its center." His Belgian accent, crisp and deliberate, carried a quiet fire. The third letter, received only days ago, had been maddeningly precise. "Churston, the 30th. Tried to stop me." It was postmarked from London, but the delay in its delivery gnawed at him, a detail too deliberate to be chance. The train slowed, and Churston's platform emerged through the drizzle. It was a quaint station, its wooden sign weathered, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and coal smoke. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, his gloved hands clutching his silver-topped cane. Hastings, ever the Englishman, pulled his coat tighter against the chill. "Not exactly welcoming, is it?" he muttered, stepping onto the platform. They were met by Chief Inspector Japp, his face as grey as the sky. His gruff Cockney voice cut through the patter of rain. "Poirot, Hastings, glad you're here, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Sir Carmichael Clark's been found dead, in his own home, no less. And wouldn't you know, an A.B.C railway guide was left by the body." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Sir Carmichael Clark, the financier, mon Dieu, the stakes rise. Take us to the scene, Inspector." The drive to Churston Manor was short but sombre. The estate loomed through the mist, its Georgian facade imposing yet forlorn, ivy clinging to its stone walls like a mourner's veil. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and old money, undercut by something sharper, fear perhaps, or death itself. Servants moved like ghosts, their whispers fading as Poirot, Hastings, and Japp entered the library. Sir Carmichael lay sprawled near a mahogany desk, his silk dressing-gown stained crimson. A single wound, precise and deep, marred his throat. Beside him, open to the Churston page, lay the now familiar ABC railway guide. The room was a study in contrasts. Towering bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, a crystal decanter glinting on a sideboard, and the stark brutality of the corpse. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance with accusation. Japp crouched beside the body, his voice low, throat cut clean. No struggle, by the look of it. Must have happened last night, around 10. The butler found him this morning when he didn't come down for breakfast. Poirot circled the room, his steps measured, his eyes darting from the body to the desk, where papers lay in disarray. A fountain pen had rolled to the floor, its ink pooling like blood. No struggle, you say? Yet the desk is disturbed. Curious. He knelt, inspecting the paper's financial ledgers, a letter half written in Carmichael's elegant script. This man was interrupted, Jap. He was writing when death came. Hastings, hovering near the window, peered out at the rain-soaked gardens. Interrupted by whom, though? The servants swear no one entered the house. The doors were locked, windows shut tight. It's as if the killer materialized out of thin air. Poirot's lips curved faintly. Air does not materialize murderers, Hastings, but cunning does. He turned to Jap. Tell me of Sir Carmichael, his life, his enemies. Jap straightened, brushing his hands on his trousers. Wealthy, well-respected, made his fortune in shipping and investments. Lived here with his wife, Lady Charlotte, and a small staff. No children, but a brother, Franklin Clark, lives nearby. Bit of a gadabout, that one fancies himself a playwright. Carmichael was a private sort, though. No obvious enemies, unless you count business rivals. Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the A.B.C. guide. And this book, always this book. It is not merely a signature, Jap. It is a challenge, a taunt. He paused, his voice softening. And I have failed to answer it in time. Don't be hard on yourself, Poirot, Jap said, though his tone lacked conviction. This A.B.C. is a slippery devil. We'll get him. Poirot's eyes gleamed with sudden intensity. We must, Inspector, for if we do not, the alphabet is long, and the graves will multiply. The investigation unfolded in the Manor's drawing room, where Lady Charlotte Clark sat rigid on a velvet settee. Her face, pale as porcelain, bore the weight of grief, but her eyes were dry, her voice steady. Carmichael was a good man, she said, her words clipped, aristocratic. He had no enemies. This madness makes no sense. Poirot, seated opposite, studied her with the precision of a jeweler examining a flawed gem. Madame, in my experience, murder is never without sense. It may be twisted, but it is there. Tell me, did your husband receive any unusual letters? Any threats? Lady Charlotte's fingers tightened on her handkerchief. No, nothing. He was private, Monsieur Poirot. If he had troubles, he kept them to himself. Hastings, standing by the fireplace, exchanged a glance with Jap. What about this brother? Franklin, Hastings asked. You said he lives nearby. Could he know anything? Lady Charlotte's lips thinned. Franklin is ambitious. He and Carmichael were close, but they clashed over money. Franklin's plays are expensive fancies, and Carmichael refused to fund them. Still, I can't imagine. Her voice trailed off, and she looked away, toward a portrait of her husband above the mantel. Poirot's gaze followed hers. The portrait showed a stern man with sharp features, his eyes piercing even in paint. A fine likeness, Poirot murmured, but it tells me nothing of the man's heart. Madame, may we speak with the staff? Of course, she said, rising. I'll summon Mrs. Hensley, our housekeeper. She's been with us for years. Mrs. Hensley, a stout woman with a face like weathered oak, entered with a tray of tea. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured, the clink of china loud in the tense silence. I don't know what to say, sir, she began, addressing Poirot. Sir Carmichael was kind, never a harsh word. Last night, I locked up as always. The house was quiet. Poirot sipped his tea, his expression unreadable. And yet, death slipped through your locks. Madame Hensley, tell me, did you hear anything unusual? A sound, a voice? She hesitated, her eyes darting to Lady Charlotte, then back to Poirot. Well, there was one thing. Around 9, I thought I heard the front gate creak. I looked out, but saw no one. Just the wind, I thought. The storm was fierce. Poirot's mustache twitched. The wind, you say? Or perhaps a shadow that moved with purpose. He set down his cup. Inspector, I wish to see this gate. The front gate, wrought iron, and rusted at the hinges, stood at the edge of the estate's drive. Rain had turned the gravel to mud, and Poirot, ever fastidious, grimaced as his polished shoes sank into it. Jap held an umbrella, though it did little against the downpour. Not much to see here, Poirot, Jap said. No footprints, no marks. The rains washed it all away. Poirot crouched, heedless of the mud, his eyes scanning the gate's base. Washed away, perhaps, but not erased. Look here. He pointed to a faint scratch on the iron, barely visible. A tool, perhaps. Someone forced this gate. Hastings squinted through the rain. Forced it, but the servants said it was locked. Locked gates can be opened, Hastings, by those who know how. Poirot straightened, his voice firm. This killer is no phantom. He plans, he prepares, and he leaves his A.B.C. guide to mock us. Back inside, Poirot requested the household's correspondence. Lady Charlotte provided a bundle of letters, but the third ABC letter was not among them. It never arrived here, she insisted. Carmichael would have told me. Poirot's brow furrowed. And yet it reached me in London. Postmarked 2 days ago, but delayed. Why? He paced the drawing room, his cane tapping rhythmically. This delay is no accident. It ensured we could not act in time. The killer manipulates not only his victims but the very post. Japp frowned. You're saying he's tampering with the mail? That's a tall order, Poirot. Not so tall, Inspector. A letter misdirected. A postman bribed. Such things are possible for one with cunning. Poirot paused, his eyes distant. And cunning is what we face. This ABC, Poirot said, pausing to face Hastings. He is not merely a madman, he is a showman. The railway guide, the letters, the alphabetical order, they are his stage, his performance. But why? Why taunt Hercule Poirot? Hastings looked up, his brow furrowed. You think it's personal, that he's targeting you? Poirot's smile was grim. It is possible, mon ami. The letters are addressed to me, not to the police. He knows my name, my reputation. This is a game, and I am the opponent he wishes to best. But why Betty? Hastings pressed. Alice Asher was older, a shopkeeper. Betty was young, carefree. What connects them? Poirot tapped his temple. That is the question, Hastings. The connection is not yet clear, but it exists. The killer chooses his victims with care. But the alphabetical pattern, it is too neat, too theatrical, I suspect. It is a mask for something deeper. A knock at the door interrupted them. A boy, no older than 12, stood clutching an envelope. For Mr. Poirot, he said, thrusting it forward before scampering off. Poirot's fingers trembled slightly. As he opened it, the paper was the same cheap stock as before, the typewriter's keys uneven. Churston, he read aloud, his voice a low growl. The 30th, he moves quickly. This ABC. Hastings leaped to his feet. Churston, that's in Devon. We've got to warn the police. Get there before. Calm yourself, Hastings, Poirot said, though his own eyes burned with urgency. We will go to Churston, but first, we must think. The killer expects us to follow his trail, to dance to his tune. We must be ready for what lies in wait. As they packed their bags, the wind howled louder, carrying the distant cry of gulls. Bexhill's shadow had lengthened, and the game was far from over. The next morning, Poirot and Hastings stood on the cliffs overlooking Bexhill's beach, the sea, a restless expanse of grey. The investigation had yielded fragments: a belt, a mysterious man, Tommy's nervous glances, but no clear picture. Poirot's silence was heavy, his mind a whirl of unseen connections. Hastings, he said at last, we are dealing with a mind that delights in order, yet thrives on chaos. The alphabetical killings are his manifesto, but they are also his deception. We must look beyond the letters, beyond the guide. Hastings nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. And Megan, she's determined to help. Should we bring her in? Poirot considered this, his mustache twitching. Mademoiselle Barnard has courage, but grief makes her reckless. For now, she must stay safe. Our task is to protect the living while we hunt the killer. As they boarded the train to Churston, the weight of the third letter pressed upon them. The ABC killer was a phantom, always one step ahead, his motives shrouded in shadow. But Poirot's resolve was unshakable, his voice a beacon in the gathering storm. We shall meet you in Churston, Monsieur A.B.C, he murmured, his words swallowed by the train's whistle. And when we do, the curtain will fall on your performance. Chapter 6. The Legion's gambit. The rain had begun to fall in earnest over London, a relentless patter against the tall windows of Hercule Poirot's elegant flat at Whitehaven Mansions. The air was thick with the scent of damp wool and the faint tang of coal smoke from the fire crackling in the grate. Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his small, immaculate figure framed by the soft glow of a single lamp, its light catching the silver of his moustache and the gleam in his keen green eyes. Around him, a circle of unlikely allies had gathered, strangers bound by grief, suspicion, and a shared hunger for answers. This was the Legion, as Poirot had dubbed them, and tonight they were to become his instrument in unravelling the ABC killer's twisted game. The room buzzed with an uneasy energy, a symphony of clinking teacups, rustling papers, and the occasional creak of a chair as its occupant shifted uncomfortably. Megan Barnard, sister of the murdered Betty, sat nearest the fire, her auburn hair catching the flame's reflection like a halo of defiance. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, darted between Poirot and the others, her fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the arm of her chair. Across from her, Franklin Clark, brother of the late Sir Carmichael Clark, lounged with a studied nonchalance, his tailored suit and polished shoes belying the tension in his jaw. Beside him sat Donald Fraser, Betty's grieving fiancé, his broad shoulders hunched, as if carrying the weight of her absence. Mary Drower, niece of the first victim, Alice Asher, perched on the edge of her seat, her pale hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the floor, as if it held the secrets to her aunt's murder. Finally, Inspector Japp, representing Scotland Yard, leaned against the mantelpiece, his gruff presence a grounding force amid the charged atmosphere. Poirot's voice, smooth and precise with its Belgian lilt, cut through the room's hum. "Ms. Amos," he began, his hands clasped behind his back. "We are gathered here not as strangers, but as a legion of force united against a most singular adversary. The A.B.C. killer. He plays with us. Nan. He sends his taunting letters. He chooses his victims with the cold precision of a chess master. And he leaves his calling card, this A.B.C. railway guide, as if to mock our efforts. But Hercule Poirot does not play games with murderers. No, no, we shall turn his game against him." Megan's voice broke the brief silence, sharp as a whip. "And how exactly do we do that, Mr. Poirot? My sister's dead, strangled on a beach like she was nothing. I don't want your theories, I want the man who did this." Her tone was raw, each word a jagged edge of grief and fury. Poirot inclined his head, his expression softening but not yielding. "Mademoiselle Barnard, your pain is understood. But to catch this killer, we must think as he does. We must see the pattern, the method, the mind behind these acts. The murders Alice Asher in Andover, Betty Barnard in Beck, Sir Carmichael Clark in Churston, they are not random. They are a performance, a spectacle designed to dazzle and deceive. And I, Hercule Poirot, believe the true motive lies hidden beneath this alphabetical charade." Franklin Clark leaned forward, his voice smooth but with a faint edge of skepticism. "You're suggesting these murders are a cover, Mr. Poirot, that the killer's playing some deeper game. That's a bold claim, even for you." His eyes, dark and calculating, met Poirot's, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. "Precisement," Poirot replied, his gaze unwavering. "The alphabetical order, the railway guides, these are the flourishes of a conjurer, meant to distract. But what does he hide? A personal vendetta, a financial gain, a secret that one of these murders conceals. That is what we must uncover, and you, my legion, are the key." Donald Fraser's voice rumbled low, heavy with suppressed emotion. "You're saying one of us might know something about Betty, or the others that could point to the killer." His hands clenched into fists, and his eyes, red-rimmed from sleepless nights, fixed on Poirot with a desperate intensity. "Oui, Monsieur Fraser," Poirot said gently. "Each of you knew the victims intimately. You knew their lives, their secrets, their enemies. Somewhere in those lives lies the thread that connects these crimes. I ask you to search your memories, to share what you know, no matter how trivial it seems. The smallest detail may be the key to the lock." Mary spoke for the first time, her voice soft but steady, like a stream finding its course. "My aunt, she didn't have enemies. She ran a little shop, lived a quiet life. But her husband, Uncle Francie, was a drunk, a cruel man. Could he have something to do with this?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "A most pertinent observation. Mademoiselle Drower, the husband of Madame Asher, is indeed a figure of interest. Tell me, what do you know of his whereabouts?" Mary hesitated, her fingers twisting the hem of her skirt. "He left Andover years ago, after he hurt her one too many times. I don't know where he is now, but he was always bitter, always talking about how life cheated him. If he's involved, he'd have to know about the other victims, wouldn't he?" "Indeed," murmured, pacing slowly before the fire. "And that is where our legion's work begins. We must trace the connections between Alice Asher, Betty Barnard, and Sir Carmichael Clark. Were they known to each other? Did they share a common acquaintance, a common place, a common secret? This is no ordinary killer, Ms. Amos. He is bold, he is clever, and he believes himself untouchable. But he is not to Hercule Poirot." Inspector Japp cleared his throat, his voice a gravelly counterpoint to Poirot's polished tones. "Look here, Poirot, I'll grant you're onto something with this patent business, but we've got no hard evidence. No fingerprints, no witnesses worth a damn, just these blasted railway guides and letters. Scotland Yard's got men combing the country, but we're chasing shadows. What's your plan then? Hope one of these folks remembers something juicy. Poirot's smile was small but sharp, like the glint of a blade. My plan, mon cher Jap, is to make the shadows speak. Each of you, he said, turning to the Legion, will investigate the lives of your loved ones. Mademoiselle Barnard, you will speak to those who knew your sister, her friends, her admirers, anyone who might have seen her in the days before her death. Monsieur Clark, you will examine your brother's affairs, his business, his enemies, his wealth. Monsieur Fraser, you will consider Betty's life beyond her charm, her secrets, her fears, and Mademoiselle Drower, you will seek out any trace of your Uncle Franz Asher, or those who knew your aunt's world. I, Hercule Poirot, will coordinate your findings, and together we shall weave a net to catch this killer. The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over them like the rain outside. Megan's eyes burned with determination, her earlier anger now channeled into purpose. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady. For Betty, I'll talk to everyone she ever knew, every man she smiled at, every friend she laughed with. If there's a clue, I'll find it. Franklin Clark nodded, his expression unreadable. Carmichael had his share of rivalsmen who envied his success, his title. I'll dig into his papers, his correspondence. If there's a motive buried there, I'll unearth it. Donald Fraser's voice was quieter, but no less resolute. Betty was my world. If she had secrets, I'll face them. I owe her that much. Mary Drower's nod was small but firm. I'll ask around Andover, see if anyone's heard from Uncle Franz, or if Aunt Alice ever mentioned anything strange. Jap pushed off the mantelpiece, his hands in his pockets. And I'll keep the Yard's resources at your disposal, pure, but don't expect miracles. This A.B.C. chop's slippery as an eel. Poirot's eyes twinkled with a rare warmth. Miracles, mon ami, are not required. Only method, order, and a little grey cells. Now, let us adjourn for the evening. Return to your homes, reflect, and begin your investigations. We shall meet again in 3 days, and I expect results. As the Legion dispersed, their footsteps echoing down the stairwell, Hastings lingered by the fire, his brow furrowed. Poirot, do you really believe they'll find something? These people, they're grieving, not detectives. And this killer, he's always one step ahead. Poirot turned to his friend, his expression serene but resolute. Hastings, mon cher, the killer is ahead, because he believes we are predictable, but he does not know Hercule Poirot, nor does he know the power of those who fight for those they have lost. This Legion, they are not detectives, Nan, but they are driven by something stronger than method, by love, by loss, by the need for justice. That is our advantage. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the room as Poirot's words hung in the air. Outside, the rain continued to fall, a relentless drumbeat that seemed to echo the pulse of the chase. The Legion had been formed, their mission clear, and the game, as Poirot had said, had truly begun. Over the next 3 days, London seemed to hold its breath, the city's usual clamour muted by the weight of the task at hand. Megan Barnard threw herself into her investigation with a ferocity that startled even her closest friends. She began at the Moonlight Calf in Bexhill, where Betty had worked, the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation filling the air. As she questioned the staff, the head waitress, Elsie, a stout woman with a sharp tongue, recalled Betty's charm but also her recklessness. She'd flirt with anyone who'd tip her a shilling, Elsie said, wiping her hands on her apron. But there was this one fella, tall, quiet, always wore a grey coat. Came in a few times, watched her like she was a puzzle he was solving. Megan's pulse quickened. Did you get his name? Anything about him? Elsie shook her head. Never spoke much. Paid in cash, left quick. But he was there the day before. Before it happened. Megan scribbled the description in a notebook, her hands trembling with a mix of hope and dread. She moved on to Betty's friends, a tight-knit group of girls who frequented Bexhill's pier. One, a bubbly blonde named Clara, hesitated before admitting Betty had mentioned a strange letter a week before her death. She laughed it off, Clara said, twisting a lock of hair around her finger. Said it was some silly note, signed with initials, A.B.C, I think. Thought it was a prank. Megan's breath caught. A letter to Betty. Poirot hadn't mentioned that. She pressed Clara for details, But the girl knew little more, only that Betty had tossed the letter into a drawer at home. Megan raced to the Barnard cottage, her heart pounding as she rifled through Betty's cluttered room. In a drawer beneath a tangle of ribbons and cheap jewelry, she found a crumpled envelope, addressed to Betty, with the same typed script as Poirot's letters. The message was brief: Bexhill, the 25th. Prepare. No signature, only A.B.C. Meanwhile, Franklin Clark buried himself in his brother's study in Churston, the air heavy with the scent of old books and cigar smoke. Carmichael's desk was a chaos of ledgers, contracts, and letters, each a testament to his sprawling business empire. Franklin's fingers traced the edges of a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Carmichael's precise handwriting. Most entries detailed investments, railways, shipping, real estate, but one caught Franklin's eye: a note about a dispute with a man named Thaddeus Gray, a former partner who'd accused Carmichael of cheating him out of a deal. Gray's threats grow tiresome. Carmichael had written, must resolve before he acts. Franklin frowned, his mind racing. Thaddeus Gray. The name was unfamiliar, but the venom in Carmichael's words suggested a grudge deep enough to fester. He telephoned Poirot, his voice clipped. Found something in Carmichael's journal. A man named Thaddeus Gray had a falling out, made threats, could be worth a look. Poirot's response was calm but intrigued. Excellent, Monsieur Clark. Find this Gray, learn his story. But be cautious, do not confront him alone. In Andover, Mary Drower took a different path, her quiet determination leading her through the town's narrow streets. She visited old neighbors, shopkeepers, anyone who might have known her aunt or uncle. At the local pub, the Red Lion, she spoke to a grizzled bartender named Tom, who remembered Franz Asher's drunken rants. Always going on about how the world owed him, Tom said, polishing a glass. Last I heard, he was in London, working odd jobs, but that was years back. Funny thing, the week before Alice was killed, someone was asking about her. Stranger, didn't give a name, had a typewriter case with him. Mary's heart skipped. A typewriter case. She thanked Tom and hurried to a telephone, relaying the information to Poirot. It might be nothing, she said, her voice trembling with hope, but it's something, isn't it? Something, indeed, Poirot replied, his tone warm with approval. You have done well, mademoiselle. Continue to listen, to observe. The smallest stone may turn the tide. Donald Fraser, meanwhile, grappled with his task in Bexhill. He sat in the flat he'd shared with Betty, surrounded by her things, her perfume, her scarves, the photographs of their happier days. His hands shook as he sorted through her letters, her diary, anything that might hold a clue. Most were mundane notes from friends, receipts, but one entry in her diary stopped him cold. Dated a month before her death, it read, met a man today, odd sort, said he knew someone from Andover, asked about my plans, felt strange, but he was polite. A.B.C initials on his case. Donald's blood ran cold. The same initials. He reread the entry, his mind racing. Betty had met the killer or someone connected to him. He telephoned Poirot, his voice thick with urgency. Betty wrote about a man with a B.C on a case. She met him, Poirot. She knew something. Poirot's response was swift. Bring the diary to London, Monsieur Fraser. This is a thread we must follow. 3 days later, the Legion reconvened in Poirot's flat, the air thick with anticipation. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the room as each member shared their findings. Megan presented the letter, its typed script identical to the killer's taunts. Franklin recounted Carmichael's feud with Thaddeus Gray, whose whereabouts were still unknown. Mary spoke of the stranger with the typewriter case, and Donald, his voice breaking, read Betty's diary entry aloud. Poirot listened in silence, his fingers steepled, his eyes half closed as if seeing the puzzle take shape. When the last report was given, he rose, his presence commanding the room. Mies Amos, you have exceeded my expectations. These threads the letter to Mademoiselle Betty, the feud with Monsieur Gray, the stranger in Andover, they are not separate. They are part of the same tapestry, woven by a hand that seeks to deceive. But we are close, oh, so close, to unraveling it. Megan leaned forward, her voice fierce. Then what's next? We've got these clues, let's use them. Let's find this Gray, or the man with the typewriter, or whoever sent that letter to Betty. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Patience, mademoiselle. The killer expects us to chase these shadows, to run in circles, But Hercule Poirot does not run. He thinks, he observes, and he strikes when the moment is right. For now, we continue our work. Monsieur Clark, locate Thaddeus Gray. Mademoiselle Drower, pursue the trail of the typewriter case. Mademoiselle Barnard, Monsieur Fraser, search for others who may have seen this man with the A.B.C. initials, and I shall consult my little grey cells and perhaps a certain friend at Scotland Yard. Japp snorted. You're a sly one, Poirot, but I'll admit, you've got me curious. I'll have my men check on this grey fellow and any typewriter sales in Hanover, but don't keep us in the dark. A Poirot's eyes twinkled. Never, mon ami. The light of truth is near, and we shall all bask in it soon. As the legion dispersed once more, Hastings lingered, his expression troubled. Poirot, these clues, they're piling up, but they're so scattered. A letter, a feud, a typewriter case. Are we really closer to catching this fiend? Poirot placed a hand on his friend's shoulder, his voice low but firm. Hastings, the scattered pieces are the beauty of the puzzle. Each is a note in the killer's symphony, and we are learning his tune. Trust in Poirot, mon cher. The Legion's gambit has begun, and the killer will not escape us. The fire crackled, the rain drummed on, and in the quiet of Whitehaven Mansions, the chase took on a new intensity. The Legion, driven by their shared loss, had become a force to be reckoned with, and Poirot, with his unerring mind, stood at its helm, ready to turn the killer's game against him. Chapter 7. The Cust Conundrum. The rain lashed against the windows of Poirot's London flat, a relentless tattoo that matched the restless churn of Hercule Poirot's thoughts. The air inside was thick with the scent of polished mahogany and the faint, lingering aroma of his morning tisane, now cold in its porcelain cup. Hastings sat across from him, his broad shoulders hunched over a newspaper, the headlines screaming of the Churston tragedy. The room, usually a haven of order, felt charged with an unspoken urgency, as if the very walls anticipated the next move in this deadly alphabetical game. Poirot's fingers tapped a staccato rhythm on the arm of his chair, his eyes fixed on a small, innocuous object on his desk, a typewriter ribbon, its black ink smudged from overuse. It had arrived that morning, delivered by a harried Inspector Crome, whose gruff voice had carried a grudging admission that Poirot's instincts might be onto something. The ribbon, found in a boarding house in Bloomsbury, belonged to a typewriter that matched the peculiar, slightly misaligned typeface of the A.B.C. letters and the tenant of that boarding house, a man named Alexander Bonaparte Cust. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice cutting through the patter of rain like a knife through silk. What do you make of a man whose initials spell the very signature of our killer? Hastings lowered the newspaper, his brow furrowing. A.B.C., you mean? Sounds like a bit on the nose, don't you think? Almost too perfect. His tone was light, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Do you suppose he's our man Poirot, this Cust fellow? Poirot's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. Perfect, mon ami, is precisely what troubles me. The killer, who writes to Hercule Poirot, who leaves his guidebooks like breadcrumbs, does not choose a name so conveniently aligned with his taunts. Nan, this is a puzzle within a puzzle. He rose, his movements precise, and crossed to the window, where the rain blurred the world beyond into a grey smear. But we must meet this, Monsieur Cust. We must see what lies behind those initials. The boarding house in Bloomsbury was a narrow, sagging structure, its brick facade stained with decades of London soot. The landlady, Mrs. Marbury, was a stout woman with a voice like a foghorn, her apron dusted with flour from a morning spent baking. She led Poirot and Hastings up a creaking staircase, her chatter filling the air with complaints about rising coal prices and tenants who paid late. Mr. Cust, oh, he's a quiet one, she said, pausing at a door on the second floor. Keeps to himself, always tapping away at that old typewriter of his. Says he's a salesman, but I've never seen him sell a thing. Nervous sort, always twitching, like a mouse in a cat's shadow. The door opened to reveal a small, sparsely furnished room, its air heavy with the musty scent of old books and damp wool. Alexander Bonaparte Cust stood by a rickety desk, his frame slight and stooped, his eyes darting like a cornered animal's. His hair, thinning and grey, clung to his scalp, and his hands trembled as he adjusted a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles. The typewriter sat before him, its keys worn and shiny, an A.B.C. railway guide tucked beside it. Monsieur Poirot Cust's voice was a stammer, high and unsteady, as if each word cost him effort. I read about you in the papers. The murders. Why are you here? Poirot's gaze was unyielding, yet not unkind, as he studied the man. Monsieur Cust, I am here because your typewriter has spoken to me. It has written letters that foretell death. Tell me, what do you know of Andover, Bexhill, and Churston? Cust's face blanched, his hands fluttering to his chest. Nothing. I swear it. I write letters, yes, but only for my work. Stockings. I sell stockings. Or try to. He gestured wildly to a suitcase in the corner. It slid open to reveal a jumble of cheap hosiery. I don't know anything about murders. Hastings, standing by the door, exchanged a glance with Poirot. The man's panic was palpable, his voice rising to a near squeak, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of confusion, not cunning. Poirot stepped closer, his voice softening, almost hypnotic. And yet, monsieur, your typewriter matches the letters sent to me. Letters that announce each crime with chilling precision. How do you explain this? Cust sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. I don't know, he mumbled. I don't understand. I've been ill, you see. Headaches, blackouts. Sometimes I wake up and don't know where I've been. His voice broke, and for a moment, the only sound was the rain drumming against the window. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. This man, with his nervous tics and trembling hands, did not fit the image of a calculating killer. Yet the evidence, the typewriter, the guidebook was damning. Was Cust a mastermind playing the fool, or a pawn in a larger scheme? Poirot's little grey cells churned, piecing together the fragments of this conundrum. Let us take a walk, Monsieur Cust, Poirot said abruptly. The air, it will clear your mind, and perhaps your memory. The streets of Bloomsbury were slick with rain, the cobbles gleaming under the gaslights. Cust shuffled between Poirot and Hastings, his coat too thin for the chill, his steps faltering. They passed a newsstand, where a boy's shout cut through the drizzle. A.B.C. killer strikes again. Read all about it. Cust flinched, his eyes darting to the headline, and Poirot noted the reaction with a subtle nod. They paused at a small cafe. Its windows steamed from the warmth within. Over cups of bitter coffee, Poirot probed gently, his voice a soothing contrast to the clatter of crockery. Tell me, Monsieur Cust, do you travel often? To Andover, perhaps, or Bexhill? Cust shook his head, his fingers twisting around his cup. I travel for work, yes, but I don't remember those places. I've been to so many towns, they blur together. My head. He touched his temple, wincing. It's not right, sometimes. Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. You've got to admit, Poirot, it's odd. The typewriter, the guidebook, his initials, it's all too neat. Like someone's trying to pin it on him. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisement, Hastings. Too neat, too perfect. The killer who taunts Hercule Poirot does not leave such obvious clues unless he wishes them to be found. He turned to Cust, his tone firm. Monsieur, have you ever lent your typewriter to another, or left it unattended? Cust's eyes widened. I don't think so, but I'm not always aware. The blackouts, you see, I lose time. His voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes I find things in my room tickets. Maps I don't remember getting. The cafe door swung open, admitting a gust of cold air, and a young woman in a raincoat. She hesitated, then approached their table, her face pale but determined. Mr. Cust, she said, her voice trembling. I'm Lily Marbury, Mrs. Marbury's daughter. I saw something, and I think you should know. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Mademoiselle, please, sit. What have you seen? Lily perched on the edge of a chair, her hands clasped tightly. It was a few nights ago, after Mother said you'd been asking about Mr. Cust. I saw a man leaving his room, late, past midnight. He was tall, well-dressed, not like the usual lodgers. He had a scarf over his face, but I saw his eyes cold, like a snake's. He was carrying something, a bundle, maybe papers. Cust's head snapped up, his eyes wide with fear. I don't know anyone like that, I swear. Poirot's mind raced. A stranger in Cust's room, tampering with evidence. The plot thickened, the threads of the mystery tangling further. He leaned forward, his voice calm but commanding. Mademoiselle Lily, can you describe this man further? His build, his manner. Lily frowned, her brow creasing. He was tall, like I said, broad shoulders, but not heavy. He moved deliberately, like he knew exactly what he was doing. I didn't see his face, but his hands, they were gloved. Leather, I think. Hastings whistled softly. Sounds like our killer's got a helper, Poirot, or someone's setting Cust up. Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. Or both, mon ami. This man, this shadow, is the key. We must find him. He turned to Cust, who looked on the verge of collapse. Monsieur, you will remain in London, under my protection. You are not safe, not yet. The investigation took a new turn and Hastings returned to the boarding house, this time with Inspector Crome in tow. The inspector, his moustache bristling with skepticism, insisted on searching Cust's room again. The search yielded a train ticket to Doncaster, tucked inside a coat pocket Cust swore he hadn't worn in weeks. The ticket was dated for the following day, and a fourth letter, delivered to Poirot's flat that evening, confirmed the destination. Doncaster. Monsieur Poirot, will you be there to stop me? The letter's mocking tone echoed in Poirot's mind as he stood in his flat. The rain now a faint drizzle outside. Hastings paced, his voice tight with frustration. It's him, Poirot. It has to be Cust. The ticket, the typewriter, the letter's it. All points to him. Poirot shook his head, his eyes fixed on the letter. Nan, Hastings, it points to him too perfectly. The killer wishes us to believe Cust is our man, but the mind of Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived. This ticket, this letter, they are bait, and we shall take it, but on our terms. The journey to Doncaster was a tense affair. The train's rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to Poirot's racing thoughts. Cust, under police watch, sat across from them, his face a mask of dread. Hastings, ever practical, kept a hand near his revolver, his eyes scanning the carriage for threats. Poirot, however, was lost in thought, his fingers tracing the edge of the A.B.C. guide he'd brought along. Doncaster, he murmured, almost to himself. The killer expects us to follow. But why? What is his true game? The town of Doncaster greeted them with the bustle of market day, its streets alive with vendors hawking wares and children darting through the crowd. Poirot, Hastings, and Cust checked into a modest hotel, where Poirot insisted on keeping Cust close. You are either the killer, monsieur, or the key to catching him, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. Cust merely nodded, his eyes haunted. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Poirot gathered his allies in the hotel's small lounge. Inspector Crome, reluctantly present, grumbled about wasting resources on a hunch. Megan Barnett, who had joined them from Bexhill, sat with her arms crossed, her voice sharp with determination. If Cust isn't the killer, then who is? We're running out of time, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice steady. Time, mademoiselle, is what we have. The killer believes he controls the board, but he has made a mistake. He has given us Cust, and in doing so, he has revealed his hand. The lounge fell silent, the only sound, the crackle of the fire in the hearth. Poirot's words hung in the air, a promise of resolution yet to come. Cust, trembling in his chair, looked up, his voice barely a whisper. I don't want to die, Monsieur Poirot. I don't know what's happening to me. Poirot placed a hand on his shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. You will not die, monsieur, not while Hercule Poirot stands watch, but you must trust me. The truth, it is close. As the night deepened, Poirot sat alone in his room, the A.B.C. guide open before him. The killer's pattern was clear, yet the presence of Cust muddled it. Was he a victim, a pawn, or something else entirely? The answer lay in Doncaster, in the shadows of a town poised for another tragedy. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The conundrum of Alexander Bonaparte Cust was not yet solved, but the game was far from over. Chapter 8. Doncaster's deception. The train to Doncaster rattled through the English countryside, its rhythmic clatter a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Hercule Poirot's mind. The carriage was dim, the air thick with the scent of damp, wool and coal smoke. Poirot sat by the window, his gloved hands folded over the silver handle of his cane, his eyes fixed on the blurred greens and browns beyond the glass. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, fidgeted with his newspaper, the headlines shouting of the latest A.B.C. Murder in Western. The weight of that failure Sir Carmichael Clark's death hung between them like a fog. Poirot, Hastings, ventured, his voice low but insistent. You're awfully quiet. What's on your mind? This Cust fellow, perhaps? Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint sign of life in his otherwise statuesque demeanor. Mon ami, it is not Cust alone that occupies my thoughts. though he is a piece of the puzzle. Nan, it is the pattern, or rather, the breaking of it. His Belgian accent, precise and melodic, cut through the carriage's hum. 3 murders, each tied to a letter, each following the alphabet, Andover, Bexhill, Churston, A, B, C, and now, a letter for Doncaster. But why do I feel, Hastings, that the killer plays a new game? Hastings frowned, folding his newspaper. A new game. You think this A.B.C. chap is changing his tune? Precisement, Poirot murmured, his green eyes narrowing. The little grey cells, they whisper of deception. The letter for arrived too late, did it not? Postmarked incorrectly, delayed. This is not the work of a meticulous mind, but of one who wishes us to believe in carelessness. The train screeched to a halt at Doncaster station, and the 2 men disembarked into a bustle of travellers, their breath misting in the cool September air. The town was alive with the hum of market davenders, hawking apples, children darting. Through the crowd, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Yet, beneath the ordinary clamour, an undercurrent of unease rippled through the streets. Word of the A.B.C. murders had spread, and Doncaster, poised to be the next stage in the killer's grim alphabet, seemed to hold its breath. Poirot and Hastings made their way to the local police station, a squat brick building near the town square. Inspector Crome awaited them, his face as dure as ever, his moustache bristling with impatience. "Mr. Poirot," he greeted, his tone clipped, "I hope you've brought more than theories this time. We've got enough trouble without chasing ghosts." Poirot inclined his head, unruffled. "Inspector, I bring the one thing that will catch this killer, the power of reason. Now, tell me, what do we know of Doncaster's role in this tragedy?" Crome led them to a cluttered office, where a map of the town was pinned to the wall, red circles marking key locations. The letter U. "Centers warned of a murder here today, the 25th. We've doubled patrols, questioned locals, but nothing yet. If your A.B.C. is true to form, we're looking for a victim whose name begins with D, and an A.B.C. railway guide left at the scene." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, Inspector, I suspect we shall find something different. The killer, he grows bold or perhaps desperate. Let us proceed to the town's heart, where the crowds gather. The stage is set, and our murderer loves an audience." The trio ventured into Doncaster's bustling centre, where the market square teemed with life. Stalls brimmed with fresh bread, glistening fish, and bolts of colourful cloth. The air carried the mingled scents of roasted chestnuts and horse manure, and the chatter of townsfolk formed a lively hum. Poirot's gaze darted from face to face, his mind sifting through the chaos for a clue. Hastings, ever the soldier, scanned the crowd for suspicious figures, while Crome barked orders to uniformed constables. It was nearing dusk when the scream pierced the air, a sharp, guttural cry that silenced the market's din. The crowd parted, like a wave, revealing a narrow alley leading to the Regal Cinema, a grand Art Deco building with a flickering marquee. Poirot's cane tapped rapidly as he led the way, his compact figure moving with surprising speed. Hastings and Crome followed, their boots pounding the cobblestones in the alley. A young constable stood guard over a crumpled form. The victim was a man, his body slumped against the cinema's rear wall, a pool of blood seeping into the cracks. Off the pavement, the flickering light of a nearby street lamp cast eerie shadows, and the distant hum of the cinema's projector added a haunting undertone. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the scene without touching. "George Earlsfield," Crome said gruffly, consulting a notebook. "Usher at the cinema, stabbed in the chest, likely an hour ago. Found by a projectionist taking a smoke break." Poirot's brow furrowed. "George Earlsfield. Not a D, but an E, the alphabet. It is broken." He leaned closer, his eyes scanning. The body. Beside the victim lay the inevitable A.B.C. railway guide, its pages open to Doncaster's train schedule. But something else caught Poirot's attention. A scrap of paper tucked into the victim's pocket, its edge stained with blood. With a nod to Crome, Poirot carefully extracted the paper, using a handkerchief. It was a cinema ticket stub, torn and crumpled, but legible. "The lady vanishes," Poirot read aloud, his voice tinged with curiosity. "A Hitchcock film, and the time, 7 p.m. this evening." Hastings peered over his shoulder. "Good Lord, Poirot, the poor chap was killed during the film. The killer must have slipped out of the cinema, done the deed, and vanished into the crowd. Or perhaps," Poirot mused, He never left the cinema at all. His eyes gleamed with a sudden spark. Inspector, I wish to see the theatre, every seat, every shadow. The answer lies within. The regal cinema was a cavern of plush velvet and gilded trim, its auditorium steeped in the scent of popcorn and cigarette smoke. The projector's beam cut through the darkness, casting scenes of Hitchcock's thriller across the screen. Patrons sat transfixed, unaware of the tragedy unfolding outside. Poirot, Hastings, and Crome moved silently through the aisles, the film's tense score swelling around them, violins shrieking as a train roared across the screen. Poirot's gaze swept the rows of seats, noting every detail: a discarded sweet wrapper, a forgotten scarf, a man slouched low in his chair. At the back, near the exit, he paused. A seat was empty, its cushion slightly askew, as if someone had left in haste. On the floor beneath it lay a single cigarette butt, its tip still smouldering faintly. Inspector Poirot said softly, "This seat find out who purchased its ticket, and this cigarette, preserve it. It may tell us more than our killer intended." Crumb nodded, dispatching a constable to the ticket booth. Hastings, meanwhile, stared at the screen, where a shadowy figure crept through a train carriage. "Poirot, do you think the killer chose this film deliberately? All this talk of vanishing and deception, it's almost too neat." Lips curved into a faint smile. "The killer, Hastings, he is a showman. He crafts a stage, a narrative. But every showman makes a mistake. This cigarette, this ticket stub, they are his dropped props." The investigation shifted to the cinema staff. The manager, a wiry man named Mr. Henshaw, wrung his hands as he spoke, his voice trembling under Fraser's narration. "George was a good lad, always punctual, never caused trouble. Who'd want to hurt him?" "Did he have enemies?" Poirot asked, his tone gentle but probing. "Or perhaps someone who took an unusual interest in him?" Henshaw hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There was a fellow who came by last week, asking about George. Said he was a cousin, but George never mentioned family. Odd chap, nervous-like, with a stammer. Kept clutching a typewriter case." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A stammer, you say, and a typewriter. Tell me, Monsieur Henshaw, did this man give a name?" "Cust, I think. Alexander something or other." Hastings gasped. "Cust, Poirot. That's our man. He was in Churston too, wasn't he?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Patience, mon ami. Monsieur Cust is a shadow, not the substance. We must look beyond the obvious." The ticket booth yielded another clue. The empty seat's ticket had been purchased by a man matching Cust's description: tall, gaunt, with a nervous demeanor. But the timing puzzled Poirot. The ticket was bought at 6:45 p.m., yet the murder occurred around 7 p.m. How could Cust have slipped out, killed Earlsfield, and returned without notice? As night fell, Poirot gathered the team in a small room above the cinema, its walls lined with old film posters. The air was thick with tension, the distant hum of the town now muted. Fraser's narration shifted to Poirot's voice, its cadence slow and deliberate, as if unraveling a tapestry thread by thread. "Mise Amos," Poirot began, pacing before Crome, Hastings, and a handful of constables. "We stand at a crossroads. The killer wishes us to believe that Alexander Cust is our murderer. The initials A.B.C, the typewriter, the sightings all point to him. And yet, the little grey cells protest. Why does the alphabet falter here, with an E instead of a D? Why the delayed letter, the cigarette, the ticket stub? These are not accidents. They are a performance." Crome crossed his arms. "You're saying Cust is innocent? Then who's behind this?" "Poirot, we've got a body, a guide, and a witness placing Cust at the scene." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The witness, Inspector, sees what he is meant to see. The killer orchestrates this chaos to obscure a simpler truth. Consider the murders in Andover, Bexhill, Churston. They follow a pattern, yes, but also a purpose. What if the alphabetical killings are a mask, hiding a single motive? And what if Doncaster is the moment the mask slips?" Hastings leaned forward, his voice eager. "You mean the killer wanted us to think it's Cust, but he's made a mistake. Hastings, the killer grows overconfident. He believes he has outwitted Hercule Poirot, but in his haste, he leaves crumbs a cigarette, not yet cold, a ticket stub placed too conveniently, a letter delayed by design. These are the signs of a mind unraveling." The room fell silent, save for the creak of the floorboards as paced Outside, the wind howled, carrying the faint strains of the cinema's final showing. Poirot stopped, his cane tapping the floor with finality. "We shall return to London, Ms. Amos, and prepare a trap. The killer thinks he leads this dance, but Hercule Poirot shall choose the final step." Chapter 9. The motive unraveled. The fog clung to London's streets like a conspirator, veiling the gaslights in a ghostly haze as Hercule Poirot's hansom cab rattled toward his flat at Whitehaven Mansions. Inside, the detective sat upright, his gloved hands folded over the silver handle of his cane, his moustache immaculate despite the late hour. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings slumped slightly, his brow furrowed, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on his knee. The clatter of hooves and the distant chime of a church bell punctuated the silence. But Poirot's mind was elsewhere, sifting through the labyrinth of clues that had led them to this precipice. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice, low yet resonant, slicing through the fog of their shared exhaustion. "Tonight, we stand at the edge of truth. But the truth, she is a slippery creature. No, we must hold her tightly." Hastings glanced at him, his hazel eyes shadowed with doubt. "I don't know, Poirot. This A.B.C. business, it's like chasing a phantom. Cust seems guilty, but you're so sure he's not. And Franklin Clark, what's he got to do with it? You've been cagey all day." Poirot's lips twitched, a faint smile beneath his moustache. "Patience, Hastings. The little grey cells, they work in harmony, not haste. Tonight, we gather the legion. Tonight, we unravel." The cab halted before the elegant facade of Whitehaven Mansions, its windows glowing faintly against the November chill. As they stepped out, the fog swirled around their ankles, and Hastings shivered, pulling his overcoat tighter. Poirot, undeterred, led the way inside, his steps brisk and purposeful. The porter, a stooped man with a deferential nod, held the door, and soon they were in Poirot's meticulously ordered drawing-room, where the air smelled of polished wood and faint lavender. The room was already alive with the murmur of voices. The Legion, as Poirot had dubbed them, had gathered. Megan Barnard, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her green eyes sharp with unresolved grief for her sister Betty. Donald Fraser, Betty's former fiancé, his broad shoulders tense, his Scottish burr softened by weariness. Thora Gray, Sir Carmichael Clark's former secretary, her blonde elegance tempered by a nervous fidgeting with her pearl necklace. And Mary Drower, niece of Alice Asher, her quiet demeanour masking a steely resolve. Chief Inspector Japp stood by the fireplace, his bulldog face set in a scowl, while Inspector Crome, younger and more polished, leaned against a bookcase, his skepticism palpable. Poirot clapped his hands, a sharp sound that silenced the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his Belgian accent rolling like a velvet tide. "We are here to confront the shadow that calls itself A.B.C., the murders Alice Asher, Betty Barnard, Sir Carmichael Clark, and now George Earlsfield form a pattern, yet beneath this pattern lies a deception. Tonight, we expose it." Megan leaned forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "You keep saying there's a deception, Mr. Poirot, but Christie's initials, his typewriter, his presence in Doncaster, all fits. Why are you so sure he's innocent?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the firelight. "Because, Mademoiselle Barnard, the truth is not a garment tailored to fit the obvious. Alexander Bonaparte Cust is a man of weakness, of nerves, not of cunning. His typewriter, it typed the letters. His presence, it aligns with the crimes. But the mind that orchestrates these murders, it is too precise, too bold for a man who stammers and faints." Japp grunted, folding his arms. "That's all well and good, Poirot, but evidence is evidence. Cust's got the means and the opportunity. What's this about Franklin Clark? Then you've been hinting at him all week." Poirot paced before the hearth, his small frame commanding the room. "Let us reconstruct, Ms. Amos. The A.B.C. railway guide, left at each scene, is a signature, a taunt. But why? To mock Hercule Poirot, Nan. It is a distraction. The alphabetical order Andover, Bexhill, Churston, Doncaster writ suggests a madman's game. Yet the murders are not random. One among them holds the key." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, lingering on Franklin Clark, who sat apart, his lean face composed, his dark eyes unreadable. Franklin, Sir Carmichael's younger brother, had joined the Legion with a quiet intensity, offering insights into his brother's life, Yet Poirot's instincts had prickled from the start. "Consider," Poirot continued, "the victims. Alice Asher, a shopkeeper with a drunken husband. Betty Barnard, a waitress with a flirtatious streak. Sir Carmichael Clark, a man of wealth and influence. George Earlsfield, a humble usher. What binds them? Save the alphabet. Nothing unless we look deeper." Hastings shifted, his voice hesitant. "You said something about a singular motive, Poirot, but how can one motive connect such different people?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Bon question, Hastings. Let us examine Sir Carmichael Clark, a man of fortune, with a brother Franklin who stands to inherit the estate. It is vast, Nan. But Franklin, he is a man of ambition, of debts. A single murder, it draws attention, but a series of murders, cloaked in alphabetical chaos, it becomes a puzzle, a spectacle. The true motive hides in plain sight." Franklin's head snapped up, his voice smooth but edged. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Poirot. You're suggesting I'd kill my own brother and 3 others just for money? That's absurd." The room stilled. Thora Gray's hand froze on her necklace, and Mary Drower's eyes widened. Megan's lips parted, but she said nothing. Japp's scowl deepened, while Crome's pen scratched furiously in his notebook. Poirot raised a hand. "Not an accusation, Monsieur Clark, a hypothesis. Let us test it. The letters, they arrived before each murder. Yet the Churston letter, it was delayed deliberately, I suspect, to ensure Sir Carmichael's death before I could act. Who could arrange such a delay? Someone with knowledge, with access." Franklin's jaw tightened. "Anyone could tamper with a letter." "You're grasping, Poirot, am I?" Poirot's voice was silk over steel. He turned to a side table, where a stack of papers lay neatly arranged. From it, he lifted a ledger, its pages marked with precise annotations. "This, Mies Amis, is a record of Franklin Clark's finances, obtained with Chief Inspector Japp's assistance, debts to creditors, investments gone sour, and yet a curious payment to a private courier in Churston, dated before Sir Carmichael's death." The room erupted. Megan stood, her voice sharp. "You mean he planned it? He used the other murders to cover up killing his brother?" Franklin laughed, a brittle sound. "This is nonsense. I loved Carmichael. I'd never silence si vous plot." Poirot commanded. "Let us consider Cust, a travelling salesman. But a man of routine. His typewriter, his presence, these are too convenient. I propose that Cust was chosen, manipulated, his movements orchestrated to align with the crimes. Someone knew his roots, his habits." Thora Gray spoke, her voice trembling. "But why? Why go to such lengths?" Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "Because Mademoiselle Gray, the killer, needed a scapegoat. A man like Cust, nervous, unassuming, is perfect. The A.B.C. letters, they are not his creation. They are the work of a mind that seeks to dazzle, to distract." He turned to Franklin, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur Clark, your brother's will it names you as heir, does it not? But Carmichael, he was considering changes, perhaps to favor Mademoiselle Gray, or a charity. You knew this." Franklin's composure faltered, his hands clenching. "That's speculation. You've no proof." Poirot stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried to every corner. "The proof, it is in the details. The courier, in Churston, paid to delay the letter. The typewriter, borrowed from Couste's lodgings, fact confirmed by his landlady. And your presence, Monsieur Clark, in Bexhill, the night Betty Barnard died. A witness, a fisherman, saw a man matching your description near the pier." Franklin stood, his face pale. "This is a witch hunt. I was nowhere near Bexhill." Japp stepped forward, his voice gruff. "We're checking that. Clark, got men digging into your alibis right now." The tension was palpable, the air thick with suspicion. Hastings, ever loyal, leaned toward Poirot. "Are you sure, old chap? This is big." Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Franklin. "The little grey cells, they do not lie. But we must be certain. We set a trap, Mies Amis. Tomorrow, I propose we stage a confrontation. We tell Franklin we have new evidence, a witness who saw him with Cust's typewriter. If he is innocent, he will protest calmly. If guilty, he will panic." Megan's voice was fierce. "And if he's the killer, I want to be there when he falls." Mary Drower nodded, her quiet strength surfacing. "For Aunt Alice, we deserve the truth." Donald Fraser, silent until now, spoke, his burr thick with emotion. Betty trusted people. If this man used her death to hide his greed, I'll see him hang. Poirot raised a hand, his voice steady. Justice, mise amis not. Vengeance. Tomorrow we meet again. Franklin, you will join us. And we shall see what the truth reveals. The meeting dissolved, the Legion dispersing into the fog-laden night. Franklin lingered, his eyes darting, but he said nothing more. As Poirot and Hastings stood alone, the fire crackling softly, Hastings shook his head. You're playing a dangerous game, Poirot. If you're wrong about Franklin, I am not wrong, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice quiet but certain. The motive, it is unraveled. The alphabetical mask, it crumbles. Tomorrow, we end this. The room fell silent, save for the ticking of the clock, its rhythm a heartbeat counting down to the reckoning. The next morning, London awoke to a sky bruised with clouds, the air heavy with impending rain. Poirot's flat was a stage once more. The Legion reassembled, their faces taut with anticipation. Franklin Clark arrived last, his suit impeccable, but his eyes shadowed, as if sleep had eluded him. Japp and Crome flanked the door, their presence a quiet threat. Poirot stood at the room's center, his demeanor calm but his eyes alight with purpose. Mesdames et messieurs, we have reached the moment of truth. Last night, I spoke of a man who saw Monsieur Clark with Cust's typewriter. This morning, I reveal more. A second witness, a clerk at the Churston post office, confirms the courier's payment came from an account linked to Franklin Clark. Franklin's voice was sharp, almost desperate. Lies. You're fabricating this to trap me. Poirot's smile was serene. Non, monsieur. The truth, it traps itself. Let us imagine a scenario. A man, ambitious but indebted, learns his wealthy brother plans to alter his will. This man, clever, devises a plan, a series of murders, alphabetical, to disguise the one that matters. He chooses a scapegoat, Alexander Bonaparte Cust, whose initials are a gift. He borrows Cust's typewriter, tracks his travels, plants the A.B.C. guides. The letters, they taunt me, but they also distract from the true crime, Sir Carmichael's murder. Megan's voice trembled with rage. You used my sister's death to cover your tracks. Franklin's face twisted, his calm unraveling. You've no proof. This is a circus. Poirot stepped closer, his voice a blade. The proof, it is in your reaction, Monsieur Clark. The fisherman in Bexhill, the courier in Churston, the typewriter's ribbon, each a thread in the tapestry of your guilt. And now, a final test. Inspector Crome, s'il vous plaît. Crome produced a small box, from which he drew a typewriter ribbon, its ink smudged but legible. Found in your lodgings, Mr. Clark, matches the A.B.C. letters exactly. Franklin's hands shook, his voice rising. Planted, someone's framing me. Poirot shook his head. Non, monsieur. You framed Cust, but you underestimated her. Poirot, the little grey cells, they see what others miss. The room held its breath, as Franklin's composure shattered. He lunged toward the door, but Japp was faster, his hand clamping Franklin's arm. Not so fast, lad. Franklin's shoulders sagged, his voice a broken whisper. I just wanted what was mine. Carmichael was going to give it all, away Thora charities. Nonsense, I had to act. Megan's sob broke the silence, and Mary, Drower's hand found hers, a quiet gesture of solidarity. Thora Gray's face was pale, her voice barely audible. You killed him, for money. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. Greed, it is a poison, mademoiselle. It blinds the heart, and twists the mind. Franklin Clark, your alphabetical game is over. As Japp led Franklin away, the room felt lighter, as if the fog outside had lifted. Hastings clapped Poirot's shoulder, his voice warm. You did it, old boy. You saw right through him. Poirot's eyes were distant, his voice soft. The truth, Hastings, it is a heavy thing, but it is found, and justice will follow. The Legion dispersed, their grief tempered by closure. Poirot stood by the window, watching the rain begin to fall, his mind already turning to the final reckoning. Tomorrow, he would confront Franklin one last time, ensuring Cust's exoneration and the case's closure. But for now, the motive was unraveled, the killer unmasked, and the little grey cells rested, triumphant.